Close enough. Yes, I am. So, good morning. My name's Tony Lohman. I'm the provost here at Rowan University, and I'm glad to welcome everybody here today for the Sweeney Center. It's our second conference focusing on energy. I think we had a number of you in this room, I would say about 4 months ago, late spring, where we talked about wind energy, and South Jersey is the epicenter of wind energy in the developments. And when we sat down and talked about some of the successes of the last conference and the connections that were made and the topics that were discussed, we thought, where could we go next? And we thought about let's have a broader-based energy discussion. Let's talk about what is our future of energy, because it can't just be wind. What does our grid have to look like? What are the different technologies that are unique to us here in New Jersey that are going to make us stronger and more energy independent? So we came up with this great program, and we got this thing moving, and quite honestly, I'm shocked that we moved as quickly as we did and got this together. But I think a lot of that comes from the tremendous interest that we have from our attendees, but also our panelists who joined us today to discuss it. And as I sit here thinking about our role, Rowan University, South Jersey, is if you imagined this 10 years ago doing something like this here, you probably would have thought we were crazy. And I think back to when I joined 10 years ago, I would have probably thought you were crazy too to do this here. And I think what's happened here at Rowan University, today you're sitting here at a nationally ranked top 100 public research university in the country. And I think about the growth that's gone on in the last 10 years, and I want to point to the back. The architect behind all of this, Dr. Ali Hushman in the back, our president. Who set a vision, and I'll tell you what, everything that this man has said was going to happen, and the vision he's laid out for us, for this institution, and the impact that this institution could have here in South Jersey has come true. And if you watch and see over the next 10 years, you're going to be amazed with what's going to happen here over the next 10 years. And the other gentleman I'd like to point to who really was instrumental in helping us get here, and we talked on Friday at another amazing event for Rowan, really shaping higher ed and economic development in South Jersey, is former Senate President Steve Sweeney, who's here in the front row. And the two of them together, what they did for transforming this region, this institution, and setting us up for the impact is nothing short of remarkable. So as we sit here today, and we talk about this research, we talk about the developments, and we talk about the growth that's going to happen in these fields, wind, hydrogen, nuclear, all these great new developments, Rowan University is going to be A, a thought leader, B, the driver of a lot of the research and innovation, and C, and I think most importantly, we're going to be training the workforce for the industry. We're going to be training your employees of tomorrow who are going to be working and driving these technologies forward and leading us to really greater heights in innovation and energy. So to begin the morning session, I'm going to invite our three panelists up. All of them are leaders here in New Jersey and leaders nationally in the energy discussions. So I'm going to call each of you up, and we'll move to our discussion. So first, I'd like to invite Ralph LaRosa, Mike Renna. Mike, I saw you here, and Steve Westhoven. Pick your seat. We'll, one of the three of you take the middle seats. All right. These three. Yeah, very good. So I'm pretty fortunate. Whoa, that was too close. So I'm fortunate today. This is kind of unique that we have three major CEOs sitting here on stage to talk to us today. And I'm going to do a quick intro of each, let each share a few remarks. Then we'll run a couple of questions, and if we have a little time, we'll open the floor up to the room for discussion. So my first guest to my left is Ralph LaRosa. I think everyone knows Ralph very well. I understand you're just coming back from someplace part of the EDA and Choose New Jersey trip to Southeast Asia. I think you were part of the leg in South Korea. So, Ralph joined PSE&G as an associate engineer in 1985 and rose to president and chief operating officer by 2006. He currently serves as chair, president, and chief executive officer of the Public Service Enterprise Group, as chair of the PSE&G board, and more broadly as chair of Choose New Jersey. So, Mr. LaRose, if you'd like to make a few comments about the future of energy in our state.
Sure, no, glad to. So welcome everybody, and Steve, thank you for putting your name on this, because at the end of the day, the universities are great, we appreciate you having us, but it's people like Steve who attract the audience that we have here. So Steve, thank you for that. You did mention a little bit, I have been traveling a lot, but I'm going to take you back a little bit because I think it's all pertains to the conversation that we're going to have here today. 6 weeks ago, I turned 60 this year, my wife turned 60, and we did a bucket list trip to Africa. And it was a family vacation, so we went to Tanzania, and fantastic time. If anybody, by the way, has any interest in ever going to Africa, please go. It's a life-changing moment. But here's the interesting part from an energy standpoint. Every day, the lights went out about 6 times. Just a fact. The generator would kick on. We'd have a diesel generator run for X amount of time, and then it would kick back over to the grid, which was more on the renewable side. So the lights were there. Electricity was good. I just don't know whether or not we as a society would put up with the lights going out 6 times a day. So I put that as a backdrop. Did some meetings on the West Coast with investors, went over to South Korea, as you mentioned, on the economic development trip, mostly because, little known fact for everyone, we were really stuck from a construction standpoint in this state because we could not find transformers anywhere during COVID. So there's no manufacturing of transformers in the US, very little. And so you have to source that from other places, and everything had dried up, everything. And so we found some manufacturers in South Korea who were willing to provide the pole top transformers that you have and the pad mount transformers that you see everywhere. And so it was not only that the governor was going there, but I had an opportunity to visit those plants and thank those workers for everything they did to keep our economy up. Because we were arguing about construction jobs and whether people had masks on. Well, we wouldn't have had any of that if we weren't able to build any of the construction that we were able to build here. And it was because of some folks in South Korea who actually helped us continue to keep construction going. Left there and went down to Australia to meet with some investors. And again, energy, huge topic, infrastructure, what opportunities exist. You know, whether it's opportunities to build bridges, whether it's opportunities to replace water pipes, whether it's opportunities to replace gas pipes, or whether it's opportunity to build out the grid, it's a huge topic of conversation, infrastructure, where they can make investments and how they can go. So I think leaving all those places and coming back home, we got a lot to be proud of. We have a tremendous amount to be proud of. We beat ourselves up in this state more than we ever should. Right? Not only do we have great infrastructure, great reliability, we keep the lights on, we keep the houses warm, and we do it in a way that has been economical for customers. We've been holding at around 2 to 4% of middle income, of take-home income for folks in what their utility bill is. That's been the same, if not less, than it has been back to 2008. And that's what all the changes we've done. And we do it cleaner than most places. A lot of that has to do with the work that Steve did in keeping our nuclear plants up and running, but the balance of everything that we've done, whether it's been replacing gas pipes that were leaking, whether it's been putting more efficient units in a home, or actually putting, you know, electrons on a grid that are cleaner than most, we got a lot to be proud of. So I think the opportunities are greater for us, but we shouldn't just dismiss all the progress we've made along the way.
Thank you. We'll move to our next panelist, Mike Renna. Mike joined South Jersey Industries in 1998 and serves as president and CEO of South Jersey Industries. He previously served as president of South Jersey Energy Solution and as president of South Jersey Energy, the region's largest energy marketer. Mike?
Good morning. I am excited to be here, although I'm going to make a note to self to go before Ralph, because I don't have a trip to Tanzania or Australia or anything to talk about. That's quite as exciting as what Ralph just explained. But look, I would agree with Ralph. I think, you know, this state has a tremendous amount to be proud of, as does really the region and, quite frankly, the broader United States in terms of our energy grid and the investments that we have continued to make as utilities in reinforcing and hardening and, quite frankly, modernizing the grid. It's allowing us to deliver the cleaner energies, cleaner fuels and energy of the future. I was in Palermo. Again, it's not quite as exciting as Ralph's bucket list, but, and it was for an investor conference, and the whole first day was really around the challenges that Europe is dealing with from an energy perspective and really on the energy supply and reliability perspective. And it hit home for me and put into context how different the challenges are there and how much more significant they are there than they are here. And a lot of that is obviously due to the war in Ukraine. But again, I think, you know, from our perspective, there are tremendous opportunities. And I think what I'm probably most encouraged by is the fact that the conversation has shifted from, you know, being just about electrification to being about decarbonization and electrification, because from our perspective, right, this is an all-of-the-above approach, and it needs to continue to be an all-of-the-above approach.
Thank you. Stephen Westhoven joined New Jersey Natural Gas as an engineer in 1990 and rose steadily through the executive ranks. Today, he serves as president and CEO of New Jersey Resources and its principal subsidiary, New Jersey Natural Gas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I haven't traveled anywhere over the past few weeks. I don't even have Palermo in the bucket list there. But thanks to the university, and certainly thanks to Senate President Sweeney and Kevin for setting it up, and Mark Magyar for putting this together. These are important things to talk about, and certainly we're in an advantaged position being in the state of New Jersey. We've got really robust infrastructure that we have in place that is really going to put us in an advantaged position as we decarbonize. And we can all talk about how quickly we're going to be able to lower emissions. We can talk about ways that we're going to go about doing it, but key component to that is going to be the robust infrastructure that we have moving forward. You know, at our company, you know, we've got a gas utility, we've got a solar business as well, you know, pretty significant. We've got about $1.2 billion in that, about 460 megawatts in our solar business. And when you look at those businesses and that infrastructure, and you look at the penetration in the state, right? We've got about, 35,000 miles of pipeline between the three of us here sitting on the dais. And the ability to deliver large amounts of energy. We're in a cold climate, right? We've got, I think on peak day, when you deliver natural gas deliveries to our customers, on peak day, it's about 60 gigawatts of equivalent electric energy. That's a lot of energy. Ralph will tell you that's quite a bit of energy, and trying to replace that and make that all electric is going to be a tremendous challenge. So the challenge that we have in front of all of us today is how do we best utilize the infrastructure that we have in order to decarbonize at a pace that's going to be affordable for our customers. That's going to be really, really important. And do it in such a way that the companies that have been supplying, you know, safety and reliability for all these years as well are able to guide this going forward and make this all work in a way that works for, you know, all of our stakeholders, our businesses, certainly our customers, and really to drive economic growth in the state as well. So, you know, great topic, and certainly an important one to talk about, you know, how do we go about moving forward and doing those things.
Thank you. So I'm going to get into a couple of discussion questions, and maybe we'll have some time to put some follow-ons. But I walked in this morning. Well, let me start with this, preface this. My first job out of college before I went to graduate school, and if the climate were different back then, who knows? I might not be here today. I might have made my career there. But I started a job at North Anna Power Station as a nuclear safety and licensing engineer in the nuclear field. And I thought it was the most interesting technology area to get into. My father was a nuclear engineer and said, hey, let's do this. So I joined a nuclear plant, and this is in the mid-90s, and all I heard was, we're just preparing for the end of life of this power plant in 20 years. And I would say monthly had to deal with protesters outside the gates of a plant that was about 50 miles outside of Richmond, Virginia. People were that passionate against nuclear power that they would drive that distance just to protest outside the gates. Yet this morning I walked in, and a couple of you may have seen our small group of 4 or 5, I don't know what we want to call them, protesters, supporters. I couldn't tell what they were. But they have signs that say, no, end fossil fuels. And they said, we love wind and nuclear, but we hate hydrogen. And I thought, what a shift that we have in our world today, that even, I don't remember when we had the discussions about the nuclear plants that Senator Sweeney ran, but PSE&G Nuclear has been a big friend of this institution, supporting the College of Engineering through a number of programs, hiring our graduates. And as such, I had the opportunity to speak at that panel, couldn't have been more than 5-6 years ago, is that right? And the whole dynamic towards nuclear with 3 Mile Island, with Chernobyl, with Fukushima, all of a sudden, it's changed. So this is to you, Ralph, what are the thoughts now? What has changed the dialogue in nuclear, and where do we go from here?
Yeah, I just think it's real simple. There's two things. One, you got to run a safe plant, and you have to have a safe industry. And the more that we as an industry do that through peer pressure and other things that we do, which I won't get into a bunch of details here, that's number one. And so 3 Mile Island, there were a lot of lessons learned. Chernobyl, there were a lot of lessons learned. Fukushima, there were a lot of lessons learned. And why I bring those up is that, we have learned from those things, we've grown, and the industry has gained confidence from the public as a result of that. So that's number one. You gotta run a safe industry. Number two is the clean aspects of it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, folks may still try to figure out, and we gotta figure out where we're gonna put the waste, right? There is no doubt about it. There's been challenges at the federal level about that and so on. But the waste that's generated from these plants is pretty small from a volumetric standpoint. I was shocked myself. I had spent most of my time in the utility and got involved on the nuclear side about 7 years ago. It's a very small amount of product that comes off. So we've got to work together, again, find a solution, not get crazy about it, and we get that part of it solved, and then I think it is 100% clean at that point, right? Certainly from a carbon standpoint. So I think it's those two factors. Let's not forget the fact that it's an economic driver, right? And you talked about it. It's where you went for a job. It's where so on and so forth. And so, put all those pieces together. It's in a sweet spot right now. Just on a sidebar, not only is nuclear going to do well from my perspective as far as a generator itself, it's a play in hydrogen when we get into that conversation. There's no doubt about it. And then it also attracts other jobs that you wouldn't even imagine that you would have down there as a result. So, we've got the wind port next door now that's there. It's more of a clean energy location, and I think more and more as we get known as a state that's been driving that, it's going to continue to drive economic development here, and there'll be other people supporting Rowan besides PSEG Nuclear.
Thank you. Well, you put a great segue then that I can maybe steer to our next two panelists, is you mentioned hydrogen. And we heard the conversation that I got coming in that hydrogen is bad, yet I don't think the people have any clue why they want to say hydrogen is bad, other than it's something new, other than something that's not been talked about. And Mike and Stephen, can you comment? What are your thoughts on the future of hydrogen?
So we have on our system a hydrogen plant that we built probably about a year ago, and we've operated for a year. It's pretty small, but it basically has given us insight to how to operate our system, having hydrogen as part of it. And we did this for two reasons. One, to gain experience, but also to really show that there's an alternate use for, excuse me, our pipelines. The ability to put hydrogen gas into the pipeline and then have our customers, use that gas and not even know that it's there. I know Nick Duraco's out in the audience. He lives in Wall Township, not far from our hydrogen plant. He's probably burning hydrogen at his house, this morning without even knowing it. And I think that's an important, part of all this is being able to, lower your carbon emissions, be able to do it in a way that's safe and provide a path, forward. You've got a number of initiatives that are taking place now. I'll just say real quick, I think not this past Friday, the Friday before, there were 7 hydrogen hubs awarded in the United States, across the United States, part of the infrastructure bill. And there's going to be subsidies of about $7 billion, rounding, towards all those plants. It's going to drive down the cost of hydrogen. So when you drive down your costs and it becomes equivalent to what's traditional fossil natural gas, it's certainly going to give you, a pretty big opportunity to use our, pipeline network in order to continue to, supply to our customers and also decarbonize as well. So I'll stop there, just leave a little bit of space for Mike, but hopefully a little bit for you.
No, absolutely. So we too at South Jersey Gas Company are also, we're in construction right now on a plant that's similar to what Steve just described. It will take the green power from a solar facility and it'll create green hydrogen, which we will then inject into our system, blend with geological natural gas, and begin the process of lowering the carbon intensity of the energy that we provide to our customers. It is a small scale project. It is an opportunity for us to learn, right? Because there is a lot of conversation out there right now around at what level, what quantities can you safely blend hydrogen with natural gas. This is at such a small level that it is well below what people have kind of established as that band around safe quantities of hydrogen, but it's an opportunity for us to learn. And again, it's also an opportunity for us to begin to, find other opportunities within our service territories. South Jersey Industry has 2 utilities: South Jersey Gas Company, which those who live in the southern third of the state, that's probably your natural gas supplier if you're a customer. And then we have Elizabethtown Gas, which is actually has 2 territories: one which hugs the Delaware River, running from Sussex down into Mercer County, and then we've got an area up near PSE&G, which has parts of Middlesex and Union counties. But again, we think that there's opportunities throughout our system to begin to produce green hydrogen. What I will say is, because one of the questions was, why the opposition? And so I'm probably going to get a little controversial here, but why not? That's why we're here. It's not necessarily the hydrogen. It's the infrastructure that delivers natural gas, right? The goal is, from those who tend to be against hydrogen, is to, right, I guess, over time, transfer or transition from natural gas to electrification. Right now, what Steve and I are talking about is using hydrogen and delivering hydrogen through our infrastructure, right? The goal of those who are against hydrogen is often, right, candidly, it's the mothballing of our infrastructure. So they view hydrogen as a threat to the sustainability of our infrastructure.
Well, speaking of infrastructure, let's talk about the grid. There's a lot of comments, questions, concerns about the future as we're adding new technologies. We're adding wind, we're adding solar at scale. We have more and more people buying electric cars, putting solar on their roofs. I personally am a electric car owner and a solar on my roof and a battery backup in my basement. So we're talking about our grid. What is our grid ready for it? Can it handle it? Or what do we need to do? This is to all of our panelists.
You want to talk about the grid? You want to talk about the
This
grid?
is good. Here we go.
Yeah, so listen, I think the answer to that question is in a bunch of different places, right? So the grid, everybody talks about, oh, it's the grid, right? And for 90% of the people, the grid means the light switch on their wall. Look, we had some real tragedies in this state over the years. Different things have happened that caused us to really upgrade infrastructure. And maybe not as much as from a tragedy standpoint, from a loss of life, but certainly from an economic standpoint. When the lights went out in 2003, those of you, a bunch of you should remember, the lights went out, the Northeast was dark, and it was a big economic impact to this region. We invested a tremendous amount of money in the transmission system. So I think our transmission system is in pretty darn good shape. And I would challenge people through a lot of facts and figures to get into that, but we're in pretty good shape on our transmission system. 2013, Superstorm Sandy comes through. And when that takes place, you know, and by the way, I want to go back. 2003, we had a Democratic administration, and they reinforced the grid. In 2013, we had a Republican administration, and we responded by reinforcing the grid. Kind of a common theme, right? Maybe for different reasons, but it's all back to infrastructure and making sure the grid's good. And so we did a ton of work on our substations and switching stations to get ready for flooding and other climate-related challenges that we're going to have, like Superstorm Sandy's coming up the area. So I think our substations and switching stations are in pretty good shape. Where we need help now is on that last mile, because you're right, electric vehicles are coming on, folks are putting solar up. The wire has to, you know, electron has to go both ways. So we've got to get that last mile ready for folks to use as much as they can. Electric vehicles, by the way, our service territory is number 5 in the nation as far as growth of electric vehicles. That's all fact-based, based upon sales of cars and zip codes. So we're number 5 in the nation now. So again, what we're doing here in New Jersey is working. We should be proud of ourselves. But today, our proactive replacement strategy for that last mile, and we run a pretty good utility from a reliability standpoint, is 0. We wait for the wire to your house to fall down. We wait for the pole to fall down in front of your house, and then we go back up and fix it. And we've got a lot of union workers that are there, and they're prepared, and so we get the lights back on pretty fast. But there's zero proactive replacement strategy for that last mile. So we've got to get in front of that and do things like you've seen done by Florida Power and Light down in the Florida area and other places to reinforce that grid, harden it, make sure the lights stay on, because you know your kids are having a, you know, absolutely freaking out if they can't charge their phone. So now, wait till you got to go pick up your groceries and you can't charge your car because that last mile isn't there. We're completely decoupled. I don't care if you're getting your power from solar, if you're getting your power from the nuclear plant, if you're getting it from the battery in your basement. It's got to go both ways. So we're okay with that, but that wire's still got to be up. And we got to just reinforce that last mile. So when we talk about is the grid ready, transmission ready, substation switching stations ready, we got a ton of work to do on that last mile.
I think Ralph would agree that not all utilities are created equal, so I think where PSE&G is not necessarily indicative of where the other utilities are in terms of readiness for the transition or for, you know, electrification on a mass scale.
Are there other utilities in the state?
There are. You know, you think about it, right? When you talk about electrification, you talk primarily about transitioning from natural gas as your primary heating fuel to electric. And that is going to require a tremendous amount of investment across the state, right? Because, you know, the winter is 3 times, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's 3 times as energy intensive as the summer. The grid is built for a summer peak, broadly speaking, right? It's built to deal with air conditioning load. You're now talking about requiring 3 times the amount of generation and 3 times the amount of infrastructure to be able to move those electrons. Now, again, that may differ from utility to utility, depending on how proactive they've been in terms of grid readiness and building out the grid. But broadly speaking, that is the challenge we face as a country. In contrast, right, the gas utilities, for a number of reasons, right, right, most of which is safety and reliability driven, have been investing billions of dollars in modernizing their infrastructure, right, making it more safe, making it more reliable, replacing the cast iron, the more vulnerable aspects of our infrastructure, the cast iron and bare steel. That has positioned the gas grid to be able to move. Again, it's had a great environmental impact because it has drastically reduced the amount of fugitive methane emissions, because all of this new infrastructure has, again, significantly reduced leaks. But it's also then, it's readied our grids to be able to deliver the lower carbon fuels of the future, whether that's hydrogen or whether that's renewable natural gas.
So agree with both of those points, and certainly, echo Mike's sentiment on it. I'm going to put on my solar hat and just talk a little bit about, PJM and the ability for PJM to react to all the clean energy that's coming onto the grid. We do quite a bit of solar development, not only in-house, but buying, facilities or projects from developers. And the speed in which, society is pushing for clean energy, and the amount that, PJM is able to put through their system, as far as, interconnects and queues and infrastructure, it takes a while to do. And that needs to be, sped up as well. And then it needs to be done right in order for it to, be able to make its way into the system and be able to, supply customers with the clean energy that they're looking for. So just one other add-on there is, we've got to look at all aspects. Last mile, we've got to look at the broad infrastructure and then how to integrate all these things together.
Steve, let me just reinforce a couple things that both of you said. So that solar stuff is absolutely true, right? Then I got to stick up for my friends at Atlantic City Electric and JCP&L. Their systems were not built the way our system was built. They were built to feed rural farm areas. So they're single radial feeds, and they get thinner. The wire gets thinner and thinner as you get to the end. So if you're going to put a solar farm at the end, they got to rebuild a lot of infrastructure to get back to the main grid, right? And so they big challenges and lots of things that have to be figured out there. We were blessed again because we were in this industrial area that had the loop system and so on. But you're 1,000% right, Rich. Is again, now back to what Mike was saying. My answer on electrification was about vehicles, really, because that's where you talked about. You start having a conversation about electrifying homes, there's a lot more to think about there. A lot more to think about there. Not only from a peak load standpoint, because now you got to figure out, okay, so what are you building the grid for? Are you building it for everything being on at the same time? Or are you going to have time of use rates and you're actually going to encourage customers? Well, we don't want to do that, so we don't have that set up in the state. So I'm not sure about that. And then, by the way, look, thank God we kept the nuclear plants, because we got 50% of our power coming from carbon-free. As we've done a tremendous amount on solar, and there's more to do, and we'll keep doing it. And we got offshore wind coming, and there's a lot to do there, and we'll keep doing it. But, man, don't electrify too fast either, because all I can tell you is that our nuclear plant is down this week for a scheduled outage to replace the fuel. And I know we didn't call on another carbon-free generator to come on the grid. It was either gas-fired or 32% of that PJM generation load is coal. It's coal. So you got to generate three BTUs of coal power to get 1 BTU to show up at your furnace in New Jersey. There's all line losses and heat losses and all sorts of other stuff. So let's really think about what we're doing here. Because I don't want to turn on another coal plant. I live in Bergen County, far away from here, and the air quality in Bergen County is the worst in New Jersey. And I don't want any more stuff coming over from Pennsylvania than I need to. And that's not going to happen if we electrify and turn on another coal plant in Pennsylvania or West Virginia.
And I think that just points to, the speed in which we do all this is going to be so important, not only from an emission standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint. If we accelerate and try to do this way too quickly, from electrification or even clean fuels, it's going to be really expensive. So as these technologies come to scale, if we can put a timeline together, then you're going to be able to provide affordability to your customers, you're going to be able to have a kind of an orderly, transition, moving forward, and you're going to avoid the situations in which we're describing. In that, if you go too quickly, nuclear plant down today, and now you're burning coal, you can avoid that because you don't want emissions profiles to go up, and you also don't want costs to go up at the same exact time, because then we've accomplished nothing.
And it's the same thing on the hydrogen front that these guys are saying. I mean, look, I don't understand at all why you wouldn't put one molecule of carbon-free fuel in a pipe today and save that from the environment. I just don't get that. I mean, over time, you might want to do some other things, right? And maybe hydrogen's not the super answer, but why not today? If you have the technology to do it today, why aren't you doing it? I just don't get that. So, another one that keeps being brought up is renewable natural gas. Well, so sorry guys, I hate to say it, but we used to call it trash gas. For the 20 years that we connected it to our pipelines, it was trash gas. And we stopped using it about 5-10 years ago because we were going to compressed natural gas vehicles, and the BTU content wasn't good enough for the engine, for the OEMs to have that product in the pipeline, so we backed off of it. Now that we want to reconnect, everybody's mad. Well, again, I don't know why we're letting carbon up from the landfills into the atmosphere if we can connect it and burn it somewhere else. So I'm not going to get into those fights, but it just doesn't make any sense for me.
Well, that's a good point, right? It's not geological gas, right? This is organic gas, and whether it's wastewater treatment facilities or landfills or, or agriculture, right? I mean, the impact that RNG has had on the communities that are reliant on agriculture through the dairy farms. I mean, just go to Western Minnesota or go to the Dakotas, and you'll understand how critical dairy is to those communities. And again, you're now taking what is just cow manure, and you're turning it into, ultimately, through anaerobic digestion, into three products, right? You turn it into their bedding. It's a solid. You turn it into a liquid that is then re-injected into the local farms and replenishing the soil that over decades and basically probably a century of farming, all the nitrates have been stripped from that soil. That's what happens in agriculture, right? So you're now re-injecting it, and you're preserving that industry up there, and then you're taking the gas, right, and you're bringing it to pipeline quality, and you're injecting it, and you are reducing carbon intensity. Right? The carbon intensity score for dairy is like a -200 and something, whereas for geological natural gas, it's an 80. So even small quantities can have a significant impact on reducing the carbon intensity. And to what Ralph's point, rather than just letting it leak or just be emitted into the atmosphere, you're repurposing it, right? And you're blending it safely with geological natural gas and having the effect of decarbonizing, which gets you to net zero on a much more aggressive time frame than does full electrification.
Were you going to add something to that one, or?
I've got nothing to add.
So I like the term trash gas. As a chemical engineer, that's something that sticks in my mind. But we're talking hydrogen and other things. What could you envision? What else is out there? What are the things that are next that are going to help us build out our sustainability, build out a net zero world? What are the new technologies on your radar?
So I think it's interesting that, we're all sitting up here today, and I think if I would ask both of you guys, 7 or 8 years ago, whether we would be talking about this, you talk about renewable natural gas, talk about hydrogen, decarbonization, we wouldn't use all the vernacular that we were using, right? Carbon intensity, things like that. How do you go about reducing emissions? Point is that there's a lot of innovation that's taking place. Directly to the question you're asking, what else innovation is there? You've got hydrogen, plants that are being built. You're going to drive down costs. Being able to leave this innovation pathway forward is going to be so important because we don't know what the future is going to hold, right? 15 years ago, you didn't know you were going to be tethered to your iPhone, right? If you had the Motorola flip phone and you said that was going to be the way you were going to exist, you wouldn't have thought that would have been the way you would go forward. Certainly, the iPhone's much better. As we look forward, carbon capture technologies are interesting. We're about to install carbon capture on our headquarters in Wall Township. It's a unit that's about the size of 2 refrigerators, and it scrubs down, the flue gas and removes carbon from the flue gas and drops it out as a solid. It's an economizer, and it runs off the energy of the flue gas itself. So things like that, as we look forward, and we look forward to decarbonize, I think it's really important to focus on two things. One, it's emissions reductions, right? And that alone should be the focus, along with the innovation to get there, and not necessarily pick a path, because we've seen over time that that technology and certainly ingenuity, finds the most efficient path, going forward in order to get to a cleaner energy future.
Listen, I could just echo everything that Steve said. But what I would point out is that we've been doing this in hitting sort of singles and doubles for the better part of it's probably going on almost 2 decades now, right? It started with decoupling. All of us are decoupled, right? Which means our profit has been delinked, decoupled from customer usage and throughput, which has allowed us to invest heavily as utilities into energy efficiency, right? Probably the easiest way, the most impactful way to reduce carbon is to not burn it, right? Not burn anything. And that's where energy efficiency comes in. So I think you're going to continue to see innovations on that front. The other thing I will say is utilities, right? We're really good at one thing, and that's spending money, right? That's what we do. We invest in infrastructure, right? That's what we do. And the infrastructure that we've been investing in, whether it's through accelerating the replacement of our old infrastructure, right, which has a direct impact, positive impact on the environment, or whether it's investing in these new clean technologies. We are one industry that is investing heavily. I'd argue there's really no other industry that invests as much in infrastructure in this state than the utilities. So again, I think that's where you're going to see innovation, right? Because we are all of us are looking at ways, we're all committed to the same goal, which is to decarbonize and to help this state and this administration and future administrations meet their clean energy goals. So we're all heavily invested in. In fact, at SJI, we've committed 25% of our CapEx. And our annual CapEx, it's not quite what Ralph's is, but it's pretty significant, right? We'll probably be spending $5 to $7 billion over a 5-year period on infrastructure, right? And we've committed 25% of that to be dedicated to clean energy sustainability investments.
So, energy efficiency, number one. I don't know what the next LED light thing is going to be, but there'll be one of those, and we keep an eye on that. And I think that's absolutely got to continue. So there'll be something on the furnace, there'll be some other things. But I do think the game changer is going to be batteries. And I got to say a couple things on that. One, we got to get the batteries and the chargers, and the way that we do this for vehicles down right. Transportation sector is the biggest issue for us in this state from a carbon standpoint and from an environmental justice standpoint. No doubt about it, right? You look at our urban centers, what we got, whether it's the port in Newark, the port down here, you got a bunch of places where we've got to decarbonize and focus on that from a transportation sector. But we've got to get kids like my daughter to be certain. I mean, she's 27 years old. She went away with 7 other girlfriends. They got in 2 cars. One got in a gas car they rented, they live in Manhattan, and the other one's got in an electric vehicle. It took the folks in the electric vehicle 8 hours longer to get up to Hudson Valley and back down to New York City than it took the folks in the gas car, because they couldn't find a charging station, because they couldn't fast charge once they found it. So we got to solve that problem for that generation so that we can fix the transportation sector. That's a battery charging station issue. And let's not forget that at some point, we got to do something with these batteries. And so when I was in South Korea, I met with LG Chem. LG is a huge battery creator. They've been manufacturing for quite some time. And their biggest focus right now is, okay, so what do we do from a recycling standpoint with the batteries on the back end? Because you're going to need someplace to put that battery power pack that you have in your basement when you're done using it. So what's the disposal? How are we going to do that? How are we going to do that from an environmentally sensitive standpoint? So let's look at the whole value chain all the way through. So that's the next technology breakthrough we've got to figure out.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Ralph just mentioned one, right? So it's not necessarily a technology advancement as much as it is sort of the way we think about solving problems. There are hard to electrify sectors, right? Transportation and maritime are two of them. I'm not even going to talk about aviation. But just the sheer weight of a battery prohibits you from using batteries or electric to move large vehicles, whether, again, it's maritime or the transportation sector. So there's where I think, again, solutions like hydrogen, right, and innovations on the hydrogen front as they relate to transportation all go towards this all-of-the-above strategy that helps us get to our goals, right, safer and sooner.
So as I sit here with buyer's remorse for my electric vehicle and solar in my house, anyone looking for a new car, by the way?
No buyer's remorse. If folks aren't doing that, it's going to be a problem. I'm doing it. But so you got to do it. It's just that we got to then think forward on what the next solution is.
Well, that's great, though. So as I think, and you're going to convince me now that I made a smart choice, is what's next for each of your industries? We've got a very ambitious zero-emission strategy for the state. What's next for your industry? We talked about the technology, but what does BPU, what does the state legislator need to hear to help companies like yours, the biggest drivers, get where we need to go, but also not pass on to the consumer incredible hikes in our prices?
I think it's working together, right? It's taking the thoughts that we've shared today, with the group, and essentially putting that towards policy going forward in a way that's sensible and, from a timing perspective and also from a cost perspective in a way that works for everybody. We can sit up here and talk about, things that'll work going in the future, or policymakers can write about things that they think can work in the future. But if it's not affordable and if the customers aren't going to accept it, it's not going to work. So you've got to get enough people involved in the process that you chart a path going forward. So you allow technologies to scale, and when those technologies to scale, you're going to see affordability, come down, and be affordable for your customers. You can see the way that, people are able to decarbonize. The popular ways as innovation, moves forward, and things that are accepted, electric vehicles, solar on your roof, and things like that. They're going to be, big pushes going forward. And then working with companies like ours that are used to, providing, what is, really a premium service to your customer, and being able to, design that in a way that your customers trust. Our customers trust all of us. They know that we're going to be very safe, we're going to be very reliable, and they're going to look to us for guidance, going forward. And when we're able to say, hey, here's the technology that you should use, or here's the way that things should go forward, we think we can, do this and basically balance affordability, along with, other things that you'll never compromise on, like, safety and reliability. Then this is going to move forward. But it's going to take a measured pace, and we're going to have to allow essentially a collaboration and innovation to scale.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you look at, again, the last decade or so, I think we've all enjoyed a very different relationship with our regulators than we had probably in the past. It has been much more of a partnership. And that partnership really set about trying to create wins for all of the stakeholders, right? A recognition that we all have stakeholders, whether it's our communities, our customers, the environment, and also in the case of Ralph and Steve and myself, shareholders. So I think that was a reflection of the leadership and the culture at the BPU, and also the leadership and culture at our respective utilities. And I think that partnership is critical moving forward, because this is going to be a radically different world moving forward. You start talking about RNG and you start talking about hydrogen, right? There's something that's very uniquely different about them, about those two technologies versus where we are today. They're going to be locally produced and sourced. That's a whole different model for the regulators and for the utilities, right? So utilities are going to I think in many cases, be making those investments. And I think they should, but that's a different conversation, right? If you start talking about putting in a green hydrogen plant at one of our utilities, or you start talking about making an investment in renewable natural gas, we didn't even talk about the one big opportunity in renewable natural gas, which is food waste, which again is a high priority for this state, is dealing with organic food waste, right? So you can get capital from a number of different places, but I would argue one of the most efficient areas to access capital is through your utilities. So are utilities going to be working with the BPU to make those investments to produce that new cleaner energy of the future? So I think this is going to end up being a very significant sort of transition, both in terms of like what happens on the ground and where those investments are made, but also in terms of the relationship that utilities have with their regulators.
Yeah, I mean, the theme everybody's saying here is just, let's just work together. I mean, we all know what we have to do, right? We got to decarbonize, and we got to do it in a way that's affordable. And you got to make sure that you're investing in this infrastructure that has provided what it has for this state for the last 150 years or so. I mean, it's just, you know, we got to keep making those investments. So we'll get there. We got to work together, not beat each other up. Very specifically, my focus is going to be to continue to help to educate people, to not go too fast, to think about this the right way. But the practical things we're going to do, we're going to reinvest in that nuclear plant that we were able to save. We're going to put more megawatts on the grid that people can use. It's not going to be a tremendous amount, but there'll be incremental megawatts that we'll be able to put onto the grid. We're going to replace the cast iron pipe that we have so that we make sure that we don't have methane leaks that are going on, and that we're able to continue to provide heating sources, because I still know when I go to my parents' house in Toms River and they got the split unit that's all electric, they still got to use Steve's furnace to keep the house warm, because the split electric is not enough in the coldest days to keep them warm in their house. So that's just a fact. And then besides those two things, we're gonna start proactively replacing that last mile, so that you can count on having the electricity as you continue to use your cell phones, continue to use your new electric vehicle, because I think it was a good decision, and whatever other things you decide to use from an electric standpoint, right? I mean, it is what it is. Things will change. Things will go back to gas. Things will go to electric. I think you'll continue to see that fluctuation take place, and we got to have the infrastructure here to do it.
Thanks. I feel a lot better about my car now. So that's good. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the time today and talking. It's been, I think, a great panel. So, well,
Got a question?
we're going to go ahead and, all right, I think Mark, can I go over, just have a couple quick questions? All right, we'll take two questions. I saw the two hands up. So we'll start here in the front. I don't know if we have a walking mic, so if you want to come up and...
Thank you, Tracy Carluccio, Delaware Riverkeeper Network. Just a couple questions about hydrogen. Why are you saying that hydrogen is affordable? Is it because of the influx of the money from the federal government? And what are you basing your facts on about hydrogen being clean, particularly because there are environmental impacts from the development of hydrogen, whether they're using natural gas or nuclear, because of the process and the very energy-intense and water-intensive process. So I understand and totally agree that we don't want more emissions, but what you're talking about here is not going to reduce emissions. As a matter of fact, it's going to continue environmental damage associated with operating the nuclear plants and building more natural gas infrastructure. So I haven't heard any facts here, and I'm really hoping to hear, why are you saying that hydrogen and these other false solutions, such as renewable natural gas and carbon capture, are somehow going to decarbonize? Because they're not. They're keeping us in the same old gas infrastructure. So please, let's hear some facts rather than just ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I thought I was dealing with some facts, and I know you were pointing at me, so I'll try my best here. Look, first let me deal with the economic issue, right? And so it is just a fact that we have, how many billions are coming?
$7 billion going into hydrogen.
And a bunch of that comes from New Jersey taxpayers. And so if there's going to be some economic benefit to, I'm not a policymaker. I'm just trying to implement what's out there, right? So the conversation about whether or not people should be doing hydrogen shouldn't have with us. But the fact of the matter is there's $7 billion available. And so I'd like to create some jobs. I'd like to do it in a way that makes sense. And everything that I've seen from a electric standpoint, if we electrify everything, I don't know where the power's coming from. If we don't have nuclear and we don't have hydrogen, I just don't know where it's coming from.
Thank you very much. We have renewables, and as a matter of fact, it would be a lot more efficient to directly make electricity from renewables.
No. I listen.
Rather than going through all the
Please.
process and energy-intensive matters
Yep.
related to the development.
No, and please, look, I don't want to argue. I really don't want to argue.
Electrification directly.
I really don't want to argue. I just want to talk about it, right? So I have solar.
Imagine if we were spending $750 million on renewables in Mach 2.
trying to answer your
That would be really something.
But that's not our decision, right? I didn't make that decision, so we're just trying to do the best we can do with the decisions that are made.
We know that decisions are made behind closed doors every day.
Oh, I haven't been involved in them.
On Mach 2,
Yeah.
and a lot of the science behind it, which as a scientist I think is a wonderful project, and I'm very proud that Rowan is a part of the Mach 2 proposal for research and training here. So to our panelists, thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Did you have another question, or we're done?
No, we're going to have to cut off questions because
All right.
I'm already over time as it is. But thank you.
Conversations are good. We should keep having them.
Thank you.
Anyway,
Fundamentally misrepresented opponents to hydrogen position, the chair of the moderator of the program and you, Mr. Wright. We know why we oppose hydrogen, you just don't want to hear why we oppose.
anyway, thank you. Thanks for our panelists. So we're going to move on now to the keynote address of our session today. And I gave a brief introduction at the beginning of the session, but I would like to invite the namesake of our center, former Senate President Steve Sweeney, to please come on up. And as somebody who's been involved with the growth of Rowan University and really our participation in workforce development, research, and training for the future, I can think of nobody who has had a greater impact with his leadership than Steve Sweeney in bringing the great technologies, keeping the nuclear plants going, as well as bringing wind energy to South Jersey. So please welcome former Senator Steve Sweeney.
Thanks, Tony. It is what it is. A lot of people with a lot of opinions. First, I want to thank Rowan University for allowing us to have this policy center. You know, we're actually tackling and focusing on issues that are very important to the state of New Jersey. And if you think back where we started with our budgeting process, we had 20 of the finest economic minds in the state, Republicans and Democrats working together to advise the legislature and forecast to the legislature what we're seeing coming. And it's funny, like when you get into forums like this with this type of group where people actually agree. They come to a place where they agree and they move forward with a really positive, well, not, the budget's not positive, I can tell you that right now, but it's positive to see people working together. Then we started on school consolidation. And we actually had a victory where we had 3 school districts that we worked with actually voted. All the citizens in each town voted to consolidate the schools. So working together and focusing on policies and explaining why this will work is critically important. to improving New Jersey. And to that panel, that was a phenomenal panel of experts talking about, what I think is very important to the economy, which is energy. It's ironic that about 6 years ago, we were fighting like hell to keep the nuke plants open. I mean, it was one hell of a battle, and if I wasn't the Senate president, those plants would have closed. There was no question about it. And it was really partisan, too. It was very partisan, to a point now where both parties are saying we need more nukes. I don't know what changed. I really don't know what changed, but I'm happy for the change. Because, trying to get things done, obviously, in Trenton is not easy. And I'm going to say something that a couple people in this room will not like. We need gas. We absolutely need gas. You can't run all the stuff that we have without it. California, which is the gold standard, today, 60% of their energy is generated by natural gas. And I'm old enough to remember when people used to fight for gas because they wanted to get rid of dirty coal. I remember those days where people said, we need more natural gas. Well, honestly, we need a very robust portfolio of energy. All you have to look is that, in Europe, with what's going on with the Ukraine war, to realize that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You need it all. And you need to expand and continue to develop new energy sources. You're going to hear from Holtec later. Real excited about that. Modular reactors. That was, I don't think anybody even dreamed that 25 years ago, and now we're talking modular reactors. Offshore wind. We have EEW here in Paulsboro manufacturing monopiles for an industry that, look, we've taken our punches because of what's going on right now with the economy, but it's needed. And by the way, it creates jobs. So all these things that we're talking about, and yes, I'm extremely excited that Mach 2 was selected by the Biden administration and that President Biden came to Philadelphia to announce it, because that's another energy source that's going to improve the environment, and on top of that, is going to create more jobs. My focus was trying to make South Jersey the energy hub for the state of New Jersey. We have offshore wind. We have Holtec with modular reactors. We're going to have PSC&G making improvements to the nuke plants in Salem. And all this does is put more people to work. But when you listen to Ralph saying he was in Africa and energy going off 6 times a day, you know how pissed off people here would be? He was a gentleman about that. I remember when we had power outages, when we had storms. How come they can't turn it on faster? Why does it take too long? Why does it take 3 days to get the lights back on? Reliability is very important. And there's no magic bullet here. We need all this energy. We need every single bit of it in order to make us energy sufficient and grow our economy. This region of the state needs it. So when you, again, there's lots of opinions on a lot of things, but we need all this energy, is to my point. Mach 2 is very exciting. I've been talking about hydrogen now for the last 3 years because, again, it's a new industry. Like when I go to look at offshore wind, I can see people working in it right now. They're jobs. But they're jobs that are helping clean up the environment. That's all the stuff that works. How we're improving the environment, reducing carbon footprint. There's an economy for this. Years ago, no one wanted to hear it. Coal was the cheapest, coal was it was the easiest solution. But being energy independent in this country and in this state is extremely important. I was in the legislature in 2003 when the power went out. That wasn't fun. I was with Governor Christie during the Sandy superstorm when the power went out. That wasn't fun. But as Ralph LaRosa said, we learned each time. You learn from experiences. Each time we learned and we made it better. The reason why we want to focus on energy with this policy center is it's so important to us. Again, you know, I hear about everyone, oh, and I have solar panels and my son's got an electric car. And I got a battery wall backup in my basement. So I got all those things too. And you know, and they're all great things. But if you put all of them on the grid today, the grid would fail. And that's what we're talking about, is coming up with innovative solutions to the demands that we need today, that we have today. So that's why we're here. And, you know, I'm very excited. Colin O'Mara, I think I said his name right, who's head of the National Wildlife Fund, is the CEO of Mach 2. He's here too. We're going to hear from him. So again, we all have opinions on everything, and they change over time when you start to understand how things work better. You know, like I said, I was here not too long ago when everyone wanted to turn all the nuke plants off. And guess what? They were turning them off all around the country, right? The cleanest fuel we can possibly have, and we were turning them all off. So again, we got to take the emotion out of it. We need to look at the facts and the science and move forward to ensure that we create that next generation of jobs in an industry that cleans up the environment and makes this world, this planet, a better place. I don't know why they say keynote address, because I thought it was a welcoming, just so you know. So I'm not talking that long. But I want to turn it over to our Giuseppe Palmese. He's the chair of the the dean of our engineering school here at Rowan. But again, thank you for being here. This is an important conversation, whether you agree or you disagree. We need to have the conversation. We need to make things move forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Sweeney. My name is, again, Giuseppe Palmese. I'm the dean of the Henry M. Rowan College of Engineering. I'm also a chemical engineer who worked for some time with pilot plants that made polymers that use hydrogen in some ways. And then I'm currently, my research is in composite materials and polymers as well, that all play a role in these new energy economies. So I'm going to start, I want to give a little background about hydrogen. I've been interested in hydrogen for a long time. Ever since, even when I was a kid, we were interested in hydrogen as a country because we were running out of fossil fuels. So the idea of a hydrogen economy goes way back, and it's had many permutations over many administrations. And of course, the reason for hydrogen now and for paying attention to hydrogen has to do with decarbonization, as was spoken very nicely by our panel earlier on. So I've always tried to bring this sort of technology back to students at all levels. And one of the things I've done in the past, having kids, is go to schools and talk to 5th graders and 6th graders about chemical reactions, because I'm a chemical engineer. And the chemical reaction that's very easy to talk about is the reaction of oxygen, molecular oxygen, with molecular hydrogen to form water. So 2 molecules of hydrogen with 1 molecule of water, of oxygen, creates 2 molecules of water and a lot of energy. So I go to 5th graders and I start off talking about an event that occurred in 1937 right here in New Jersey, which was the Hindenburg explosion. And I tell them about the amount of energy that's in hydrogen and the fact that hydrogen is a very low-density gas that allows for buoyancy, and that's why you can create these zeppelins that float in the air. But the safety is very important. So we talk about safety, we talk about chemical reactions, stoichiometry, and the generation of energy. And then we move on and talk about the space shuttle and the ability of taking spacecraft from the ground into orbit and beyond, and the need for energy to do that, and that the way to do it has been the controlled combustion of hydrogen with oxygen. And they go crazy about it. They see all the different videos of the space shuttle and it blasting off and getting into space. And they realize, hey, we can control all that energy that's stored chemically in this material. So storage becomes an important aspect. And that's what we're actually talking about when we talk about hydrogen today, is storage. But of course, it's still sort of a violent reaction because you're getting liftoff and it goes up in the air like that. And you have to liquefy the hydrogen in order to get enough of it into the system so that you can do this. So it turns out that hydrogen has, per mass, 3 times the energy density of other fuels, gasoline, for example. But to get it to that point, you have to liquefy it. Because otherwise, well, to get it to be used in that way, you have to liquefy it to get enough mass into the system, or you have to compress the gas. So they recognize that there are different states of matter, the students, and this is 5th and 6th grades, and then they can figure out how to bring things together. And they look at the tanks on the space shuttle, and they're able to say why one tank is bigger than the other. And then you move on to saying, okay, well, we could also, in a much more controlled reaction, take oxygen and hydrogen and put them together electrochemically in a fuel cell and come up with electricity. So now we convert hydrogen with oxygen in the atmosphere to electricity in a very controlled way. So that's in a nutshell, in an hour and a half with students at the 5th and 6th grade level, that they understand chemistry, states of matter, storage of energy, conversion of energy. And that's what we're really talking about. So the fact is that we've been working with hydrogen for decades and decades and decades. The chemical process industries, the petrochemical industries know how to work with hydrogen in a safe way and how to use it properly. So we're starting at a pretty good spot to move decarbonization efforts forward. Now, one of the reasons why hydrogen might be getting a bum rap, in a sense, in terms of it not being environmentally friendly, might be that 95% of all hydrogen produced today comes from the reforming of methane with steam. So we're taking natural gas to make hydrogen. So obviously, that does not help things out, because when you do this reforming, you form CO2. CO2 goes in the atmosphere, and that's what happens there. There are ways to take other ways of getting methane. You heard about some of them in the panel earlier. Biogas from food waste, that's one way. I'll come back to that in a bit later. You can also figure out ways of doing carbon sequestration. That's fine too. There are different ways of doing it. Some might not be as good as others. The idea from most of the petrochemical, because you have to do this at scale, enterprises, is to take the CO2 and geologically trap it again. That might have some issues associated with it that we won't discuss, but it is a method. And then all the way to some very innovative ways of taking natural methane sources and converting them into hydrogen and then carbon, right? Carbon being a solid that you could simply landfill and dispose that already exists in nature. So there's technology of that type that can also be talked about. But really what interests us a lot now when you start to look at the analysis of how all these materials come together and the energy that's generated is the use of nuclear energy. And here I'm talking about nuclear fission. In the future, we'll have fusion as well. But nuclear energy comprises in the United States, I think, between 10 and 20% of all electrical power generated. And here in New Jersey, we are fortunate to have almost 50%, as I spoke about in our last meeting, of electrical energy produced by our nuclear power plants. And it's well known, and it's been very well discussed over the years that, and there is I think we have come to realize that in order to reach our decarbonization goals as a world, we're going to have to increase nuclear power production quite a bit. In the world right now, we have about 400 nuclear reactors. There are about 50 being built right now, some in the United States, and these have to grow even more. And the leadership right now in the growth of these nuclear power plants has been mostly in places like China and India. So I think we have the opportunity to move forward with that regard. And something else was mentioned earlier by the senator as well. These small modular reactors, which are the future in technology in these systems for fission, become very important in all of this. These are systems that have something, the creation of between 300 megawatts to 30 megawatts of energy that could be placed in various places to produce electricity that then could be used to make hydrogen, as I'll get to in a second. These types of reactors are also part of our future and that we have to build upon. As far as electrolysis is concerned, and the conversion directly now of electricity to hydrogen, so now what we have is the backwards reaction of the fuel cell, right? The fuel cell took hydrogen and made electricity. You could also take electricity and make hydrogen and oxygen. This is something that can be used, as I said, for the storage of energy, because you can take electrical energy made in a, quote, green fashion and convert it into hydrogen, which is then stored and then reused later on as electricity using a fuel cell, for example. It is a very interesting technology, particularly for industrial applications and transportation, as was mentioned before. Transportation not only for large buses and naval type applications, but I think also for cars, because we talked a little bit about the battery operated cars that we have right now, and they are, whether you like it or not, clunky, all right? They take a long time to charge. You have to find the charging stations, and they're heavy. The batteries in them are heavy. So this is my own personal view. I'm looking at everything that's out there. I think that the battery electric car is probably going to be kind of like the CD and the CD player, and that probably other technologies, and one that I'm favoring right now is the idea of fuel cells with hydrogen storage on board, will be what kind of takes over. So it'll still be an electric car, but now the electricity will come from fuel cells that are supplied by hydrogen that's stored on board. So about right now, the way we are working with storage of hydrogen that's compressed, about a 50-gallon capacity tank operating at 10,000 PSI could get you a 300-mile range for your car, right? But with the advantage that you could fill it just as quickly as you would a gas-operated vehicle. So in the end, the opportunities are very, very big. I think that it's not going to be instantaneous. There's a lot of work that has to be done. The partnerships between government, universities, industry are very, very important. Everybody has to be working together on this. From a university point of view, we work on training of students. It's very important for us right now to work with the trades, work with community colleges as we're doing, to create materials and training opportunities in nuclear, in hydrogen economies, and all the other renewables as well, to work on developing and adjusting curricula, particularly in chemical engineering, that deal with electrochemistry, that deals with the nuclear industries, that deals with safety, that brings some of these processes that deal with hydrogen back into the classroom. That's something that we're doing here at Rowan right now. And we need to work on, in general, sustainability curricula in the university that's accessible to those who are out there in the workforce right now. So that means a lot of online classes in these emerging areas. From a point of view of R&D, the electrolyzer, what converts the electricity into the hydrogen and oxygen, has a certain efficiency that it operates at. It's about 70% efficient. So there's work to be done there in terms of making those more efficient and more durable. So we work on catalysts, polymer membranes that operate in those things, et cetera. We have to be able to store the hydrogen, so the storage tanks become an issue. We have to be able to transport hydrogen in the infrastructure that is existing. So right now we're putting small amounts of hydrogen in the natural gas. If you go to higher concentrations, there are issues with materials that need to be dealt with. So barrier coatings to protect the metals that are used in our infrastructure would be things to work on. And we're doing all of this, but what's really important at a university level, I think, is to work on R&D at scale. And so at scale means in systems that then can translate very readily into application, whether it's industrial or in the public utilities, for example. So what we envision is being able to have these electrolyzers and these other fuel cells at a scale that's comparable to what you'd have in these plants out there in industry. So on our West Campus here, what we're doing is creating exactly that sort of opportunity. We have something we call RUMIC, Rowan University Manufacturing and Infrastructure Center, that is meant, we're looking at it as some place where we're going to have the ability to create these larger pilot scale facilities. And one example of what's going on is we talked about the conversion of food waste into natural gas, which can then also be then converted to hydrogen. We have a company called BioDevco that's going to be coming to our West Campus. And the whole idea there is to work with our students. Not only are they going to do their food conversion using anaerobic digestion, but our students will be embedded in that facility and will be using their gas to see how we can convert it into hydrogen ourselves. So there are a lot of opportunities of this type. We're very happy to be part of this Mach 2 that we'll hear more about later on. And I think I'll end my comments here, except to say that the future is bright with all of this, provided that we all work together, the government, universities, and industry. So thank you very much for spending a little time and listening to me on this. We have about a 10-minute break now before our next talk, and we'll see you then. Thank you.
That's right.
But thank you.
So are they.
How you guys doing? Do you know where I can plug the wire into for audio? Yeah. Can you guys just for audio, it's for like an XLR? Where do you want me to work? Where should I plug into? Okay, no problem.
So I routed left to right, matrix 1 and 2, and then matrix 1 and 2. I received it.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
So they uncomplicate this.
Sure, yeah. Plus the room would be. Because if he was sending a matrix in the house, he could have sent it.
Stick one of those. Go right ahead. Thank you. Is that mic or line?
It'll be line level.
It's line?
We're going to start in the next few minutes. Also, I want to provide like left.
Hello, everyone. Let's get ready to start again in a few minutes. So please take a seat. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker, Christine Gould-Sadovi. Christine was appointed by Governor Phil Murphy as president of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities earlier this year, 2023. Prior to her nomination, she served as cabinet secretary in the governor's senior staff. President Gould-Sadovi previously worked at NJBPU, where she rose as the position chief of staff under the late President Joe Fiordaliso, helping to spearhead Governor Murphy's clean energy agenda. During her time as NJBPU chief of staff, Ms. Gould-Sadovi worked on several key initiatives of the administration, including the 2019 Energy Master Plan, implementation of the 2018 Clean Energy Act, and development of the state's electric vehicle incentive program. Prior to serving in the Murphy administration, Ms. Gould-Sadovi worked as the legislative and political director for Planned Parenthood Action Fund of New Jersey. President Gould-Sadovi is a lifelong New Jersey resident. She received her bachelor's degree from Rutgers University and serves on the board of Anchor House, Inc., a Trenton-based youth homelessness organization. Please join me in welcoming President Christine Gould-Sadovi to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much to Rowan and the Sweeney Center for inviting me here to speak with you, and to former Senate President Steve Sweeney for his leadership on clean energy. It's really an honor to be here with so many distinguished speakers, and many of the people in this room and many of our speakers have been key partners in advancing the clean energy future with the Murphy administration. The late BPU President Joe Fiordaliso spent the duration of his career at the BPU preaching, as he would say, about the impacts of climate change. One thing we know for sure is that climate change is already affecting New Jerseyans almost daily, and those impacts have costs. These are costs that we can't afford to ignore. And I'm not just talking about the catastrophic costs of storms like Ida and Sandy, which are in the tens of billions of dollars. It's also the day-to-day costs, the incremental climate impacts that we are seeing regularly, not just major events. Heavy rains that are causing significant flooding events. I was just in Asbury Park last week, and one of their flagship restaurants is still closed from the flooding that happened there a few weeks ago. This flooding contributes to increasing insurance rates for homeowners and businesses. There are now more flood-prone areas, so more residents and businesses need flood insurance that previously didn't. The utility infrastructure damage caused by storms and the necessary investments to upgrade this infrastructure, beach erosion and replenishment, all of these climate impacts have costs that are borne by residents and businesses in New Jersey. We know that moving away from fossil fuels will help to mitigate the impacts of climate change. New Jersey has to do its part in that effort, and that's what the Murphy administration is about. So we're here today to discuss some of the solutions to the challenge of reducing carbon emissions. And it is a challenge, but one that we know we can tackle even in the face of misinformation if we stay focused on the benefits of the clean energy economy. So a couple of questions. How do we equitably decarbonize our economy to avert the worst impacts of climate change and be a national leader, all while ensuring that we keep the lights on? What tools do we have right now, and what tools could we add to our clean energy toolbox? Since Governor Murphy was elected in 2017, he has, with our partners in the legislature and in industry, some of you in this room, made New Jersey a national leader in the development of clean energy. We have an ambitious but achievable goal of 100% clean energy by 2035. And we're on our way toward that goal because of the work of many of you in this room. Other states have learned from our success over the last 6 years, and if you love New Jersey like I do, Jersey pride matters. These states have modeled their policies and programs on our progress in offshore wind, in community solar, and energy efficiency. These policies have helped more than 53,000 New Jersey workers, many union earn family-sustaining wages, and in 2022, that number grew at the 4th highest rate in the nation. But New Jersey had a head start in our clean energy transition, in part because of our well-established nuclear generation. This is one of the most effective and reliable solutions we have to combat climate change and ensure that New Jersey is doing our part to reduce emissions. Nearly 40% of our in-state generation is already carbon-free. Nuclear energy is a key part of the foundation of our clean energy transition, and we remain committed to maintaining the environmental, economic, and workforce benefits that our nuclear sector provides. Along with offshore wind and solar, as well as energy efficiency, nuclear will help power New Jersey's clean energy future. But there's another solution with the potential to assist in carbon emissions reduction, particularly in those hard to decarbonize areas. And it's one of the reasons that we're here and something we've heard a lot about, and that is hydrogen. I will say I had a whole chemistry lesson, but the previous speaker took that, and so now my whole chemistry lesson you all already know, so I'm gonna pass on that. There's a lot of interest and speculation about the role that hydrogen can play in our state. I think we've been hearing that this morning. The 2019 Energy Master Plan identifies hydrogen as a viable alternative fuel candidate. Hydrogen can be produced locally and regionally. As we know, South Jersey is part of the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub, awarded up to $750 million in federal funding. Some of you in this room may be having an I told you so moment about the location of the hydrogen hub in South Jersey. I don't need to tell you who you are. The Mid-Atlantic Hub is one of the 7 regional hydrogen projects expected to collectively produce 3 million metric tons of hydrogen, reaching approximately 1/3 of the U.S. production target for 2030 and reducing carbon emissions by 25 million metric tons. The Murphy administration has been exploring the potential opportunities that hydrogen, specifically clean hydrogen, can play in New Jersey to help achieve our energy goals. The EMP identifies clean hydrogen as a viable alternative. For those unfamiliar, clean hydrogen is produced using renewable energy in the case of green hydrogen and nuclear in the case of pink. In 2020, Governor Murphy signed the law creating the Fuel Cell Task Force with the BPU chair. The central role of the task force is to assist in the growth and use of fuel cells and the development of the necessary infrastructure. The main purpose of the task force was to produce a report, which it did a few months ago. I know all of you have read that report. But if you haven't, I'll talk a little bit about it. This report was produced in conjunction with Montclair State University, and it outlined the strategies to increase the use of fuel cells in New Jersey. It intended to serve as both an introduction to fuel cell technology and resources to policymakers and the public. It explores and identifies ways fuel cell systems can complement responsibly developed offshore wind and solar for strategic uses in our clean energy economy. As New Jersey increases renewable energy in its generation mix, resources like hydrogen and nuclear will be important for maintaining reliability. Clean hydrogen could have a significant role in reducing carbon in the transportation sector, and we've heard a little bit about that already, with a particular focus on heavy and medium-duty vehicles. Trucks, buses, marine vessels, and other heavy-duty equipment are not optimal for existing BEV technology because of their weight, range, cargo needs, and the time that it takes to recharge. Fuel cell technology powered by hydrogen from clean sources can play a larger role in commercializing zero-emission trucks and displacing highly polluted diesel engines. And the need for an electrified medium and heavy-duty vehicle transition is seen especially in disadvantaged environmental justice communities, where the effects of transportation-related emissions are more prevalent. The state is also home to many large warehouses where fuel cell-powered equipment offers significant advantages over diesel or battery power in terms of emissions, productivity, and life cycle costs. But there are a few key barriers that we need to think about when it comes to hydrogen development. The first is we need to ensure that we're focusing our clean generation on putting electrons on the grid. New Jersey is a net importer of electricity, and as we progress toward our clean energy goals, we need nuclear and renewable energy to provide the necessary power we're using in-state. This is even more important as we advance electrification of light-duty vehicles. We want to ensure that our in-state clean generation is going where we need it most and where we'll get the most bang for our buck to reduce carbon emissions. The second barrier is cost. As we look at costs across the spectrum, we must be mindful that the cost of hydrogen development right now can be prohibitive. But that's why this investment from the Biden administration in the Hydrogen Hub is so critical for New Jersey. Sure, it would have been great to have the North Jersey Regional Hub approved as well, but we're all one state, right? I live in Central Jersey, so I can say that. There's more work to do to fully assess the opportunities and potential of hydrogen. The Fuel Cell Task Force report contains several recommendations which clearly demonstrate the state's comprehensive and thorough approach to meeting Governor Murphy's goals and exploring potential opportunities to add another tool to our climate and clean energy toolbox. Hydrogen for fuel cell storage and heavy-duty transportation could prove to be compelling, and the BPU looks forward to working together with many of you in this room to evaluate these opportunities. I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the work of so many of you here to advance clean energy in New Jersey, particularly former Senate President Steve Sweeney. Because our state has led the way on offshore wind, under the governor's leadership, we are now poised to be a manufacturing and marshaling hub, not only for New Jersey projects, but for all projects up and down the East Coast. So while it's important that we acknowledge the role that nuclear has and will play and the potential of hydrogen for our clean energy future, let's not lose sight of what we know will be transformative for that future. Thank you so much again for inviting me to speak. Thank you, Rowan, and thank you all for the work that you are doing to advance the clean energy future in New Jersey.
Well, thank you so much, Christine, for those great words concerning our nuclear, hydrogen economy, and all other renewable sources of energy in New Jersey. So 10 days ago in Philadelphia, President Biden announced a $750 million federal grant to the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub, better known as MACH2, as you've been hearing about. And this MACH2 program is meant to develop hydrogen energy in its southeastern Pennsylvania, South Jersey, and Delaware region. We are very pleased today to welcome Colin O'Mara, who serves as chair of MACH2 to this consortium of companies and universities. Colin also serves as president and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation, the nation's largest wildlife organization, representing 6 million hunters, anglers, birders, gardeners, hikers, paddlers, and wildlife enthusiasts. Previously, he served as cabinet secretary for the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control, DENREC. We're now delighted to welcome Colin to discuss this MACH2 initiative and the implications of this federal grant to our tri-state region. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you, Giuseppe. It's great to be with all of you. It's great to have this fantastic campus. It's just absolutely gorgeous here. So thanks for getting me across the river to be with you all today. I want to take you back a couple of years to a piece of legislation that passed the U.S. Congress in 2020. It was called the Energy Act of 2020. And inside there was a kind of the beginnings of a whole series of initiatives to try to figure out how to decarbonize, kind of tough to decarbonize sectors in the economy, as we just heard. And in this bill, they actually proposed these kind of hydrogen hubs. That was conceptual, there's no money behind it. It's kind of classic Congress proposing a bill without any resources. Flash forward a year later, after President Biden was elected, and there's kind of negotiations for bipartisan an infrastructure package, which obviously is creating great work all across the country. There was an effort, a successful effort, to fully fund that program to the tune of $8 billion to try to create hydrogen hubs to really try to accelerate the kind of the transition towards cleaner sources of hydrogen. Now, as you'd imagine, as somebody with the National Wildlife Federation hat on, the legislation wasn't perfect. It did actually encourage a full range of different types of hydrogen, from gray and blue to kind of green and pink. Obviously, we wanted more of the latter and less of the former. But for the first time, there's a significant federal investment in trying to drive hydrogen production and consumption as a way to decarbonize tough to decarbonize sectors, especially the industrial sector and the transportation sector. And so with that bill signing in November of 2021, all of a sudden a competition kind of took off across the country. And 79 regions across the country began to put together applications. And for somewhere between 6 and 10 hubs were likely going to be selected. And a lot of people kind of poo-pooed the chances of this region. I'll say one person that didn't was Senator Sweeney, who kind of saw it from the beginning, as did Don Norcross, Representative Norcross. You can clap for that. That's good stuff. And we began having conversations about what would make our region competitive. And a couple things came to mind really, really quickly. One is that we have the potential to have the entire hub be produced with green hydrogen and pink hydrogen. We didn't need natural gas. And a lot of that's because of New Jersey's leadership. Frankly, it's PSE&G, it's having the kind of clean power from the nuclear plants. It's the leadership that all of you have provided on offshore wind, kind of crossing administrations from, Corzine into Christie into Murphy. Having those real sources, opportunity because of the huge solar program you've had in the state for a long time and the kind of generous incentives. And so we began to kind of put together a proposal with the goal of making it the cleanest, the most zero-emission proposal in the entire country. And so the proposal, there's different iterations. There's actually some misinformation out there. There was an abstract from a year and a half ago that included a little bit of blue hydrogen. None of that's in the proposal that DOE funded. This is the cleanest kind of hydrogen proposal that's in the entire, of the 7 that were funded, this is by far the cleanest and the lowest emission. And so there were a couple different strengths, right? So the one was that we had this kind of huge amount of existing and proposed clean energy generation. The second is that we have stronger labor unions in this region than almost anywhere else. And between the South Jersey building trades, the Philly building trades, the folks in Delaware, having the voice of labor at the table from the beginning to make sure that we're not just creating jobs, we're creating good union jobs, making sure that a lot of folks are work, making sure we're prevailing wage, making sure that we have project labor agreements. So that was kind of a second strength. And then the third strength that we had was that this very corridor that we were looking at trying to repower industrial plants and heavy transportation vehicles are also some of the areas with some of the highest levels of particulate matter and asthma in the country. I mean, that Route 9 corridor kind of in Delaware up through 95, kind of coming across through up kind of the Jersey Turnpike, that corridor, especially on the Philly side and on the Delaware side, has some of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. And so you put that constellation together, and all of a sudden, our proposal went from kind of this little engine that could, competing against, the Texas proposal or the Gulf Coast proposals, these different huge regions, all of a sudden started to make a lot of sense. And so I want to use some of my time today to talk about kind of the contours of the proposal, because again, I know there's a lot of misinformation, and also we just got the award last Friday. I mean, President Biden just announced it a couple days ago. I know there's a lot of interest. It is kind of a secretive process because of the way the Department of Energy works. There's a lot of kind of business confidential terms, so I will share everything I humanly can, and a lot more is going to be coming out soon. But what I wanted to share with all of you is that the simple goal is to try to make sure that we have an abundant supply of clean and kind of green and pink hydrogen that's distributed primarily through existing pipelines that are re-sleeved across the region to try to make sure that our heavy-duty vehicles, our transit systems, our factories, our warehouses, our industrial facilities have access to zero emission hydrogen that's basically only emitting water vapor as a way to replace the diesel, fuel oil, and other fossil fuels that are being used right now. Like, that's the vision. And so, like, there's some places that some other regions, propose a lot in, like, the residential sector, the commercial sector. Like, we believe that the focus, the best places that hydrogen makes sense are those hard to decarbonize areas. Frankly, there's a lot of places we can electrify, right? We can electrify light vehicles, we can electrify the residential sector, we can electrify a lot of the commercial sector. But when you start getting into like cement and steel and some places in the chemical processing, those are places that have high heat rates that they need a ton of energy. They just don't make as much sense for electrification. There's parts you can do with electrification, but you're still going to need higher energy inputs. And the thing about hydrogen, and I guess you guys have already gotten the chemistry lesson, but there's about 3 times as much energy per molecule of hydrogen than other sources of energy, right? So it's a high impact kind of decarbonizing technology. Now, that said, you got to do it the right way. And I think one of the things that kind of worries me across the country is that it's still a lot cheaper to produce hydrogen from natural gas, through steam reformation than it is from renewable energy or nuclear energy through electrolysis with water. I mean, the cost differential is still pretty high. Now, the one thing that this grant's going to allow us to do in the Mid-Atlantic is help reduce that cost. So that, combined with some really generous federal incentives, are going to level the playing field. But our goal is to get to a place where a kilogram of hydrogen, of green hydrogen, is less than the cost of diesel or fuel oil, and with a whole lot less variability, right? So every time there's a conflict conflict overseas, we see the price of oil and gas get affected. All of a sudden now, if you have hydrogen produced by renewables that have flat costs, and the cost of water obviously is pretty consistent, even though we got to be careful about the scarcity potential over time. It's a way to actually make our region actually one of the most competitive for manufacturing price points in the decades ahead. And so really trying to get back to having this region that's been a kind of a heartbeat of American industry for so many centuries. I mean, you think about, on this side of the river, on the other side of the river, up through Delaware, for a lot of the 20th century in particular, this was like one of the biggest places to make things again. And so one of my goals through all this is having, kind of cleaner fuels that reduce our emissions, achieve our climate goals, but also in a way that makes this region more competitive economically, so we can manufacture things again in America, but not in the Mid-Atlantic, and not having all those products coming from overseas. So flashback to the process. So we start putting our proposal together, and we're going up against, Shell's got a big proposal in western Pennsylvania. There's all kinds of, industry, Chevron, all kinds of like the big guys in other parts of the country. And we have this kind of ragtag group of folks across the region. And we start kind of lining up a lot of the political leaders in the region, kind of starting with Mayor Kenny in Philadelphia, who's one of the early champions. Manny Citrone's here, who was kind of the point for the city, just did an absolutely hell of a job. Governor Wolf provided a lot of leadership throughout the process. When we were first getting started, Governor Shapiro kind of picked it up right after that. In Delaware, Governor Carney played a big leadership role. In Jersey, a lot of leadership came from Senator Sweeney and then from Congressman Norcross. There was another proposal that wasn't funded in the northern part of in the state with New York. That was kind of where a lot of the state focus was. So we're hoping to kind of redirect that focus into this region right now. But they went from 79 applications down to 33 that were qualified to kind of proceed and kind of encouraged to apply. From those 33, they interviewed 11, and then from those 11, they selected 7. And so every time, we kind of made the cut, and it was because of this combination of being greener, more labor-friendly, and having kind of very targeted specific uses in the industrial and heavy transportation systems. So what does it mean for New Jersey? What does it mean from the New Jersey side, just given the leadership? I think there is an opportunity, as was just said, for the next phase of New Jersey's kind of clean energy leadership to not just be offshore wind, but to also be in green hydrogen and pink hydrogen. There are manufacturers that are in all 3 states that have the opportunity to supply the electrolyzers to kind of convert the renewable energy, kind of use the renewable energy with an electrolyzer to split the water molecule, the H2 from the O, to create the hydrogen and then the byproduct of water vapor. This creates huge opportunities to make sure that the economics are effective. So as we're thinking about excess power coming off offshore wind farms, we're just thinking about making sure that our nuclear plants have the revenue they need to sustain themselves. As we're thinking about small modular units, some of the innovations that Holtec and other companies are thinking about. But there's a lot of infrastructure existing right now on the New Jersey side, whether that's the Rapano facility or PBF's refinery in Paulsboro, different places, some of the port facilities that make a lot of sense for production. And one of the things that I didn't really fully appreciate when we were starting this application almost 18 months ago, was that there's actually a pipeline system that already exists that used to connect with what were 7 refineries across the region. Only 4 of them are still kind of operating in some kind of refining capacity. That already exists, and a lot of the movement of product in that infrastructure was hydrogen. Now they all have to be re-sleeved. They have to be safe, and we got to make sure we avoid fugitive emissions, because if hydrogen escapes from the system, it can actually accelerate kind of climate change. It's an accelerant, for especially like methane. So you have to be very careful making sure the system's a closed loop. But we have this infrastructure that actually connects the very assets in the very places. This connects, things like the Port of Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Airport and Marcus Hook in Delaware, kind of through the city of Philadelphia, coming back and forth across the river, a couple different places in New Jersey. And so the idea that you could have production, kind of clean energy production, clean hydrogen production on the PBF property, on the Rapano property, on other places, in some cases close to the nuclear plants, still trying to figure out some of the details there to make sure it's done safely and in accordance with all the different procedures. But having kind of production in different places that's being sold into the system, and then having off-takers across the region, things like Jersey Transit, Camden's got some opportunities in Atlantic City with the airport, with some of their operations, there's different industrial facilities here. Obviously, there's a lot of chemical facilities right on the other side of the Delaware Memorial Bridge that could be converted to hydrogen over time and replace some of that diesel and some of that fuel oil. All of a sudden now you have this opportunity to have a marketplace with buyers and sellers kind of selling into a very safe infrastructure that's state of the art and completely modernized to try to make sure that hydrogen's not just accessible but affordable. And that's a value proposition that, frankly, none of the other regions was able to provide. Now, there's some places that there's an innovative project as part of the Mach 2 universe that's in southern Delaware, in Georgetown, Delaware, which is, it's about 20 minutes from the beach for those of you who go down to the Jersey beaches instead of the Jersey Shore. But there's, and they're going to have a huge solar field. There's going to be electrolyzers. There's going to be fueling stations for their trucks, for the Delaware DART, the transit buses there. Also for ag equipment that could be converted to hydrogen over time. So that's going to be more of a kind of distributed solution. But I'm really hoping that we have multiple nodes of production, and these aren't going to look like plants. I don't know if you guys have had a lot of slides on this yet, but folks are thinking about kind of a lot of steel pipes and things like that. It's the electrolyzers themselves are kind of almost like a server farm, right? They're kind of they look like the back of a flatbed truck. They're kind of the trailer of a truck, kind of stacked next to each other. Now the nice thing about that is that there's a ton of jobs, right? Because you got jobs for IBEW and for LIUNA and for UA and for steam fitters. All the unions in the building trades are going to have a ton of work. We estimate it's going to be about 13,000 to 14,000 construction jobs just to get the system in place across the 3 states. And obviously a ton of those would be right here. And then another 6,000 or 7,000 operating jobs. And this is all the different points of, from folks maintaining the renewable energy systems, or with the nuclear production, to making sure the electrolyzer farms are working well, to all the connection jobs and all the integration jobs, to the points of fueling stations or different connections and upgrades to different industrial processes to make sure you can use it. So a ton of jobs right across the system, and really almost every part of the system is going to have to be modernized and improved to take advantage of the hydrogen. And so where we are right now in the process. So President Biden comes to Philly about 8 days ago, 9 days ago, makes the big announcement, and we're actually held up as the model because we are the cleanest and the most labor friendly, and have this kind of industrial opportunity to decarbonize. We begin the next 12 to 18 months on really just trying to engage folks and make sure they kind of fully understand the projects, making sure that the kind of public engagement, the planning process is really done well. It's kind of a classic federal government kind of multi-stage process. So there'll be a little bit of money for the first phase, but it's not like we're getting $750 million at once. It's over 9 years in 5 different tranches. And so I know there's some folks concerned about, decisions already being made and not enough public process. We're just at the cusp of the beginning. There's actually going to be a session Wednesday night, and we'll get the information to everybody to share, kind of laying out the process, laying out the hubs, a lot of the information I'm sharing with you right now. But the goal is to have a series of public engagement opportunities, over the next year, to make sure that folks know exactly what's happening, see the benefits, if they have ideas, if they're interested in the workforce opportunities. I'm really excited about the job opportunities. Especially when you think about in southern New Jersey, there's an opportunity to put thousands of people to work if we do this right in the building trades. Partnering with the community colleges, partnering with the workforce investment boards, getting folks kind of apprenticeship ready. There's a lot of job opportunities, but that's going to take time, right, to line up those pieces. And a lot of the skills exist, but a lot of folks are going to be upskilled, making sure that kind of they're up to the most modern kind of standards for safety and efficiency for the hydrogen market. So that's the first phase. And then as we're doing that, the second phase that begins kind of in 2025 is going to be beginning, kind of completing the permitting processes and then beginning construction of some of the projects. Some of the projects are a little further out just because of the technologies that have to evolve. And then you get into like 2028, there's another tranche, 2030, there's another tranche. And so, this is a long-term play, right? This is a big play over several years. I mean, we're very grateful for the unique kind of constellation that's come together in support of this. As I said, starting with the building trades and labor, but universities, Rowan's been involved from the very beginning, given the university's just incredible leadership here in the Sweeney Center, and making sure that this is kind of a way to attract talent, but also make sure the folks that are graduating from here have great jobs. Incredible opportunities similarly with folks at Penn, at Drexel, Cheney University, which is a great HBCU, is going to be leading a lot of the workforce efforts as well. Partnerships with Delaware State University, and then University of Delaware, which has a Center of Excellence for Clean Hydrogen. That's a part of the National Renewable Energy Lab program. So this kind of constellation that we've had, between heavy industry, the chemical industry, this existing infrastructure, all of which is kind of some folks view as part of our past, is all being leveraged and kind of modernized to be a big part of our future. And so, I'm really, really excited about the pieces. I mean, $750 million federal grant is not something that happens every day. The fact that 79 other communities got it and only 72 left disappointed in the process is a good thing. I get there's a lot of questions. My commitment when I came in at the beginning was I wanted to make sure that one region got it absolutely right. And the reason we can is because of the assets we have, because of many of the assets that many of you in this room, own and are stewards of. I want to be the one hub, right, that doesn't have any blue hydrogen in it, that doesn't have any gray hydrogen in it, that's showing that we're adding electrons to the grid. I mean, the point that was made before about now not taking electrons that could be used for vehicles or other things. We're going to have to put a lot of additional renewables and a lot of additional nuclear on the ground in the years ahead. But doing this in a way that really makes sense. And, right now, if you think about kind of the climate equation overall, about 25-30% of the emissions come from the power sector. That's been going down obviously as more clean power is coming online. About 25-30% comes from the transportation sector, and you can electrify about half of that pretty easily. And the transportation is actually beginning to kind of overtake the power sector as the major source of emissions. But right behind is that industrial sector. And in a region that has had challenges with environmental justice, and so many folks that are breathing dirty air, the ability to repower those facilities and not lose the jobs, but actually have the jobs in cleaner processes where folks can actually have safer working conditions, and the communities around the fence line are a lot healthier, and have great kind of well-paying manufacturing jobs. That's an incredible kind of outcome that can happen. And I think that the industrial sector and the ag sector, to a lesser extent, are going to be the most difficult to decarbonize, because we also don't want to create kind of disincentives to actually manufacturing in America, right? A lot of environmental programs over the last 20 years, as you're trying to clean up emissions, actually make it harder in some cases to want to make things here, which ends up resulting in facilities overseas, in places with more lax rules and a lot less controls, but also a lot more pollution. I want those jobs here in America. Mach 2 wants those jobs right here in the Mid-Atlantic. And the way to do it is having cleaner fuels. And so I talk way too quickly. I'm way too caffeinated for this early. I have a 6-month-old, and so I've been up since about 3:30 in the morning already. I'm kind of well past my lunchtime. But I'm really excited, and I get there's fears, and I get there's questions, and there's always that old joke that hydrogen was the fuel of the future and always will be. That future's now, right? It's just we have to do it right. And we got the technologies to do it right. We got the renewables. We got the nuclear. We got the kind of the feedstocks to do it right. We have more abundant water. We got to be smart about that. We got to make sure that we're responsibly using water, especially if we're seeing saltwater intrusion and other challenges in the ecosystems. We have the need because we have this manufacturing base. We got the workforce because we got stronger labor unions in a lot of other parts of the country and better trained folks. And so the question is, can we have the vision to be the region that kind of leads this part of the clean energy revolution, just as we're trying to do for offshore wind? It's a pretty big challenge. It's pretty exciting. It's a burden too to get it right. But I want to look back 10 years from now. When my 6-month-old is 10 years old, and say, we not only have cleaner air and less dirty skies, but we created a ton of jobs for folks who want to stay in this region. I would love to be in a position right now where this region isn't consistently among the higher kind of unemployment rates in the country, right? Where there's more places where somebody, without a college education can still earn, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 making something that's kind of, incredibly productive and making sure that they can feed their family. This is going to be a piece of that equation. And it's not just going to be in the hydrogen sector, but all the things that it unleashes that we can now do more cost competitively because of it. So I'm incredibly excited. The Mach 2 team has been just kind of incredible. A lot of other regions had tens of millions of dollars to spend on their proposal. I think we spent, I don't know, maybe $1 million, Michael? I don't know, maybe something like that. McCartan English did some great work, kind of advising us into some more legal work, the great Jersey company. But we're in a great place right now. And so I just want you all to know, and just my final minute here, it wouldn't have happened without folks across Southern Jersey. It wouldn't have happened without the companies in Southern Jersey. It wouldn't have happened without labor in Southern Jersey. It wouldn't have happened without Rowan. It wouldn't have happened without Steve Sweeney. It wouldn't happen without Don Norcross. And so we can be really proud that this is happening across our region, because every region, every kind of state within the three stepped up in big ways. And hopefully the transformation will be incredible for generations to come. So thank you very much. I'm going to be here for a little while if folks have questions, but I hope you can get excited about it, and we're going to try and do it right. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to Colin O'Mara. One more time, a round of applause for Colin as we transition. If we can have the panel start to work their way up, Sean and Myron and Jenna and Ed.
Test.
Everyone's mics working?
I think so.
Sounds like it. All right, well, let's jump into this panel discussion. Good morning again, everyone. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Christina Renna, and I am the president and CEO of the South Jersey Chamber of Commerce. I'm also really proud to sit on Senate President Sweeney's board here at Rowan, so thank you for that as well. Really, from what I hear, because I just walked in, really interesting conversations have been had, great speakers, of course, and we're going to carry that through now on our next panel, which is on challenges and opportunities specifically in nuclear, hydrogen, and other emerging energy technologies. And we have the best of the best panel up here to discuss these issues. So what I'm going to do is we're going to individually introduce everyone. I'm going to start with Sean, and then I think we're going to let Sean give a few minutes of opening remarks, and we're just going to go down the line. So brief introduction, some opening remarks, then we'll move on to the next, and then we'll jump into some pre-planned questions we have before wrapping up around noon. So with that, for those of you who don't know, Sean Moriarty, to my left, he is Deputy Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, where he has spent the last 6.5 years rising from regulatory officer to Deputy Commissioner for Legal, Regulatory, and Legislative Affairs to his present post. Previously, he served more than 5 years each as an associate with Archer and Griner, and also as a Deputy State Attorney General. Most of us in this room have worked with Sean in some capacity. He's the best to work with, and we're happy to hear from him. So Sean, opening remarks from you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for making my bio more interesting than it usually is. I'm going to use rise now every time I talk. So I don't want to shout at you, but I'll try to be clear and loud enough. Since I'm from the Department of Environmental Protection, I have to make every conversation we ever have about climate change, right? So this is about climate change as well. I think we all know that, we have this kind of conversation ongoing about the threat that climate change poses for our kind of economy, our communities, our way of life, right? And the transition to clean energy and the challenges associated with that are obviously part and parcel to that, right? As a low-lying state, dense population development patterns, we're ground zero for adverse impacts. 2 feet of sea level rise in the next 30 years, 5 and 80, right? So that's really what that does. When you couple it with the significant increases in precipitation by the end of this century, kind of brings into focus the need for action now on a clean energy transition. Right? We no longer have time to talk about it. We no longer have time to debate whether we are making that transition. The time to act is now, and we need to identify the challenges, and we need to begin to work to address those. We have a ton of goals, right? Everybody loves goals. Goals are great. We put them down on paper, and then we try to figure out how to meet them, right? So we have our Global Warming Response Act, our 2007 Global Warming Response Act, 80 by 50 emissions reductions. We have an interim benchmark of 50% emissions reductions by 2030, working aggressively towards those in the EGU sector, wildly popular actions in the transportation sector, of course, and we're going to continue to do that. Hey, Joey, how you doing? And then we have our 100% clean energy goal, right? Most recently, Governor Murphy signed Executive Order 315, which accelerates that target to 100% clean energy. Now that's 100% clean energy sold in the state to come from clean sources of electricity by January 1st, 2035. That's a big deal. It's a huge kind of acceleration of our goals, and I think really works to set the state clearly at the front of pushing forward market forces to begin to continue to accelerate that. So really, kind of what the EMP, or the Energy Master Plan, does for clean energy, the Global Warming Response Act 80 by 50 report does for our emissions or goals, right? It recognizes that we need to make significant progress in these areas. We've already kind of rapidly transitioned away from coal-powered energy generation, but we need to do more in the transportation sector, in the clean building sector, residential and commercial, as well as the EGUs. We've taken steps already to do that. California Clean Trucks Rule increased our GHG reporting to close significant gaps. Cargo handling, omnibus rule to set stronger nitrogen limits on medium and heavy duty vehicles, as well as our proposal for regulations and adoption of regulations to set CO2 limitations for our EGUs, right? That's what we're able to do on that side. We've also recently issued our Strategic Climate Action Plan, or SCAP, which lays out our current and future efforts to meet these twin goals, right? That includes significant improvements, as we said, in emissions tracking, working with BPU, and I saw the new BPU president here, so we're all in good hands, to support the electrification roadmap, increase efficiency, continue to drive EV adoption through investment of our RGGI funds. Over $400 million has come to the state in the last several years from RGGI, as well as complementary regulatory reform, as I talked about, our wildly popular attempts to adopt Advanced Clean Cars 2, and our efforts to reduce vehicle miles traveled, right? We have to, the transportation sector is 40% of our emissions. There's a lot of work to be done there. And then ultimately, on topic for today, support clean energy transition, right? We've done significant work on solar. We have a new solar siting tool, which is really tremendous, and can highlight the benefits and the real opportunities for solar development in the state, as well as the administration's focus on offshore wind, right? So the good news is, right, I can talk for days on our emissions reductions goals, but the good news is that they really go hand in hand with what we're trying to do in a clean energy transition, right? There's clear overlap between what we need to do to reduce emissions and what we need to do to meet clean energy. And we'll talk a bit more about that today. What I think we all recognize, even at the Department of Environmental Protection, is that this is a long road, right? There's going to be a continued reliance on fossil fuels for some period of time. That period of time, to lessen that period of time, we need to really dramatically expand renewable energy and distributed energy resources. But as we progress, those challenges become different, if not more difficult, right? Like, we've made tremendous strides in raising awareness, acceptance of our path and future, but we really need to kind of take that next step and transition into, individual, localized, project-specific choices, right? Everybody loves progress, but nobody loves change, right? We have established the progress. We are now at the point of change, right? And that is where the conversation we're having today, and the conversation that we'll continue to have, is really, really, really important. So thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for that. So, Mark, I'm going to go out of order on the script you provided me. We're going to go down the line in which we are seated for opening remarks. So, Ed, that makes you next. So we have Ed Postanek here, who serves as Executive Director of the New Jersey League of Conservation Voters, a nonpartisan organization whose mission is to elect environmental champions, hold public officials accountable, and support laws which protect our environment and improve the quality of life. A former chemistry teacher, he also serves on the Franklin Township Council in Somerset County. So, Ed, with that, a few minutes of opening remarks from you, please.
Great, thanks so much. It's awesome to be here. Senator Sweeney, thanks for having us. Folks may not know this, but Senator Sweeney oversaw one of the most environmentally productive legislators in over a decade, so congratulations for that. And also for taking notes from how to save energy by not turning on the heat. today. So we appreciate that as well. A little bit about me. My name is Ed Potesnik. I'm Executive Director of New Jersey LCV and Freezing, cold, as I mentioned. There was a number of chemists that talked earlier, but no one mentioned Mold Day. So I also want to wish you all a very happy Mold Day. And for those of you who don't know, a mole is a really important number in chemistry because we can't see atoms and molecules. They're just too tiny. So we use the mole to look at them by weight. It's the way we can relate the actual things to a way that we can work with them in the real world. And if you walk away with nothing from chemistry except for that, it is very significant. Otherwise, we'd never be able to do a reaction because we wouldn't have any way to relate to those little tiny things. And it's a super huge number, like goes on and on and on, 23 digits. So a little bit about New Jersey LCV. We are the statewide political voice for the environment. And one of the things we do is we pass laws. And it's important to look at some of the things we've done just recently. And I don't want to take up too much time, but last legislative session, we passed a bill with the help of great legislative champions, as I mentioned, and other partner organizations to increase energy efficient standards for our appliances. So to give you a sense of how much that'll save, by 2050, that will save New Jerseyans $400 million by getting Energy Hog window fans off the shelves so that when they buy the same price, basically, fan, it's going to use that much less energy. So that was huge and also really impactful. In addition, Sean talked a little bit about the governor's goal of 100% clean energy by 2035. We are big supporters of that. And then another one, which is electric school buses. So many of us have children. They go to and from school. They breathe in dirty diesel bus fumes in their vehicles. And if you haven't been on a school bus in a while, I was at a wedding about 2 weeks ago, and we went to the wedding on the school bus. It still stinks. It stinks, and it's bad. And that's why our asthma rates are so high. That's why we have so much cancer. We have some of the worst air in the country. Nearly every county in New Jersey has terrible grades on the American Lung Association. So these electric school buses are amazing because they're going to get that smelly air out of the lungs of our children, who are filters for us. That's unfortunate. And it'll electrify those. The other thing that's really cool is these electric school buses are big. They require a lot of electricity to go. School is only in session for 180 days a year. So that means the rest of the time, what can they do? Well, it's summertime, right? When buses aren't being used. With vehicle-to-grid technology, you can actually take that battery and on a high cooling day, when it's hot outside, we're getting more of those because of climate change, you can take the bus battery, put it back to the grid, and you can power our needs. So a lot of people, I think earlier in the panel, they said, you know, if we electrified everything, the world would collapse. It'd be like, was it Tanzania or something? Indonesia? I don't know what place it was. The truth is, we can be a lot smarter about how we use our energy and use our resources. I'm going to give you one last example and then one takeaway, if the only thing you hear. So one example is, if you have a pool and a house, and in the summer, you're heating your pool with an electric heater from your solar panels, let's say. To make the heat for your pool, that heat pump produces cool air. In your house, to cool your house, your air conditioner produces hot air. Why don't we connect the hot air from your air conditioner to heat your pool? That's a policy decision. It's not really an engineering decision. It's a consumer decision, and we can do better. And inefficiencies like that exist across the whole spectrum of energy use. Your refrigerator in your house, cooling, producing heat, et cetera, et cetera. And we can do something about it. And the one thing I want you to remember, because we heard a lot of things thrown around today, and I think we'll have these discussions, and they're important. 90% of America's energy needs can be satiated with wind in America by 2050. So everything we're doing, electrifying everything going forward, 90% of that can be covered with responsibly developed wind. So as we talk about other technologies, we also need to talk about wind as a solution, clean, renewable energy solutions like solar that could pick up maybe the next 10%. We could talk about nuclear, we could talk about hydrogen, we could talk about a lot of other things, and it's important. But to think we can't, we can. And we can do things a lot different, and we can do them to make it healthier for our future generations, and we can make sure they inherit a planet that they don't have to escape from the coastal areas. 199 miles of the best beaches in America are the Jersey Shore, and they're under attack from climate change. So we can address that as well as the public health issues for our kids and grandkids. So I look forward to talking about this a little bit more. Thank you.
So next up, we have Myron Kazmarski, the Vice President of Holtec Governmental Services. Myron has more than 40 years of business development and project management experience in the commercial and governmental sectors of the nuclear energy industry. He has extensive experience both in design, installation, and startup of nuclear systems and facilities, and in their decommissioning and remediation as well. With that, Myron, opening statement.
Oh, Christina, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity to participate on this panel. Mark, thank you for the invitation. Senator Sweeney, thank you for the invitation to represent Holtec. I'd like to speak a little bit about, a little background about Holtec and a little bit about our energy technology innovations that we are pursuing. First, I want to mention I was completing my master's degree in nuclear engineering in 1979 when 3 Mile Island occurred. So I've been waiting my whole career for the nuclear renaissance, and I believe with all the incentives and perceptions that have become very positive in the last couple of years, I believe we're finally there. We're finally occurring with the nuclear renaissance. A little bit about Holtec. I work at our Camden Technology Campus, where in 2017 we commissioned our advanced manufacturing facility, which is one of 3 heavy manufacturing plants that Holtec operates. In Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania, and Orvalon, Ohio. The advanced manufacturing plant in Camden was specifically designed for the manufacturing and fabrication of components for small modular reactors and microreactors. Over time, Holtec has now become the largest provider of dry cask storage systems in the world. We have contracts at 70 nuclear plants in the United States, 70 nuclear plants internationally in 12 countries. Holtec happens to be the largest provider of fabricated components in the nuclear industry in the United States. We've built up a backlog of $8 billion in backlog of work associated with the storage of spent nuclear fuel, which gave us a platform where today we are an energy technology innovation company. Again, we are developing a safe modular reactor, which we've recently upgraded to 300 megawatts, going through the process of developing a safety analysis report with the support of a grant from the Department of Energy. Again, we are part of the Mid-Atlantic Hydrogen Hub as a team member. Our project that we proposed is to be located at the Oyster Creek Nuclear Plant, which is one of 5 nuclear sites that Holtec now owns with regard to the decommissioning of previously operating nuclear facilities. At the Oyster Creek nuclear site, our project included the deployment of hydrolyzers, potentially offshore wind, on-site solar, and a future location for our safe modular reactor. Now, again, it's a real pleasure to be part of that team. Again, we are also pursuing a deployment of small modular reactors throughout the world as well. So again, looking forward to further discussions. Again, as an energy technology company, also I wanted to mention as part of our Oyster Creek project, we have a thermal energy storage system that will be in support of the renewable energy, again, which will provide, when there's surplus energy, to store that energy and then to reutilize it for the production of hydrogen. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Myron. So, last but not least, certainly, we usually say ladies first, not the case today. I'm sorry, Jana. Many of you know Jana Chersnetz from her 11 years as the New Jersey Director for the Tri-State Transportation Commission, where she developed a reputation as an outspoken advocate and one of the state's leading mass transit experts. She now serves as Senior Director of Global Governmental Affairs for Amogy, did I say that? Okay. Amogy Incorporated, one of the companies that is leading the way in the development of ammonia as an important energy technology in the transportation sector. So Jana, the floor is yours. Opening statement.
Thanks. I actually like going last.
Okay. There you go.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mark, for including me, and thank you, Senator. It's great to be back with a lot of familiar folks, although I'm wearing a different hat. And in all the years that we've worked together, I don't think I knew you were a chemistry teacher. And I'm going to be a little nervous now because I'm be talking a lot about chemistry. And I wanted to apologize also to my chemistry professor saying that this attorney will never need chemistry. Well, I was very, very, very wrong with that. So thank you for the opportunity today. As I said, I'm Jana Turnitz. I'm the Senior Director of Global Government Affairs for Amogy. Amogy stands for Ammonia Energy. We are a startup. We started in November of 2020. I joined the company in May of 2022, about a year and a half in, which is very early for an energy and technology startup to recognize the need for having government affairs as part of the core team. So I was very excited to be able to do that to help build the company up. I'll start with telling you what we are doing, and usually I have slides to explain the chemical reactions and how our technology works, so I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards to go more into depth about that. But what we are doing is we're developing a power system harnessing the energy of ammonia, which is a hydrogen carrier. So hydrogen is H2, ammonia is NH3. Ammonia is a hydrogen carrier and is actually more dense than hydrogen itself. What we are doing is we're developing a 200 kilowatt power pack that takes the ammonia, cracks the ammonia using a proprietary catalyst. That's a part of our technology. So it cracks the bonds of the nitrogen and hydrogen. It's then fed into an adsorber to collect any of the unreacted ammonia. And then from there, the nitrogen and hydrogen is fed into a low temperature PEM fuel cell to create electricity. So our system is a modular system, 200 kilowatts, so it can be stacked like Legos. So that's a really brief overview of what we are developing and what we are manufacturing. And now I'm going to explain a little bit about why and why ammonia is critical to be part of this conversation. So we're looking at the hard to decarbonize sector. So that would be heavy trucking, maritime, agriculture. We're focusing right now on maritime. It accounts for 3% of global emissions. If nothing is done, that is on course to increase to just under 20% of all global emissions if this is not eradicated and mitigated. There is no clear solution for this sector like there is for other sectors that are not as energy demanding. So right now, the maritime sector and port infrastructure and port sector is looking at methanol, hydrogen, LNG, and we are looking at ammonia specifically. And why? I talked about the density of ammonia being NH3. It is also much easier to store and to transport than pure hydrogen is. Ammonia is the second largest produced chemical globally. We use it mostly for fertilizer, but now it is poised to become the leading energy source for, right now, maritime fuel. There are roughly 200 ammonia ports worldwide, and about 3,000 miles of ammonia pipeline already here in the United States. So taking advantage of that existing infrastructure, which is one of the higher price tags for this great energy transition. Right now, ammonia is being looked at on a federal level. The Ocean Climate Action Plan is looking at grants and other kinds of instruments to elevate and to use ammonia as a power source. What else could I say about ammonia? When I started with Amogy, it was when the NOFO dropped for the hydrogen hubs. And one of the things that I noticed was that hydrogen carriers, and specifically ammonia as a power source, was not included. And I think that as we're moving forward with this historic investment, looking at emerging technologies such as ammonia is going to be critical for future-proofing this investment. The DOE had looked at ammonia as a power source, but had looked at it and shelved it because we were looking at single occupancy vehicles, not realizing where the true power and benefit of ammonia was in that hard to decarbonize sector such as maritime. So as we're moving forward with these hydrogen hubs, including innovative technologies, globally ammonia is being recognized, I said, as a promising maritime fuel, and also for stationary power. So we're also a global company. We have an office in Norway. We have an office in Singapore. We have 2 offices in the US. The Asian Pacific is very important too because Japan is looking at ammonia on a utility scale because of the lack of natural resources and land. So there is a lot of promise when using ammonia, but we need to start recognizing that now and including those in these decisions as we are moving forward in this great energy transition. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say, as someone who studied political science, you just sounded like the most brilliant person in the world to me. But I was able to follow along, so thank you for your explanation. That was actually very, very helpful. So, okay, so we're going to move on to the questions. We have about 30 minutes left, and we have 4 questions. We're going to try to get to all of them. I'm going to start again with Sean, if you don't mind. Sean, as we all know in this room, when the governor announced new goals with the Energy Master Plan earlier this year, lots of people were thrilled. Lots of people were skeptical of being able to meet that demand. So a few questions, right? One first, the grid. Can the grid sustain the kinds of goals the governor has put forth in this Energy Master Plan? And is the public support there? I know today, right, there's lots of different voices on this discussion. So would love your thoughts on, the plan itself, how we get there, the grid, and support, generally speaking.
Sure. I think the public support question is quite challenging, right? And I think that, the conversations that we've had today have pointed out kind of a lot of the nuances as to what qualifies as public support. And we talked about earlier kind of the difference between progress and change, right? Like I think there is broad public support for, the high-level energy goals, right? The idea that we need to decarbonize, our energy sector. I think there are a lot of questions and a lot of conversations about the pace of that. And I think the governor's goal kind of does zero in on that a bit. But the question remains about what that means for people. And each of the things we talk about, whether it's ammonia, whether it's small modular reactors, whether it's stuff that Ed talked about that I can't understand because I am a lawyer who didn't have to do chemistry and I'm never going to do chemistry, right? So, when you get into that level of detail, it becomes a lot more challenging, right? When you're talking about whether the offshore wind farms are going to be, if you're going to see them from your house, or whether the new infrastructure that's necessary to support hydrogen or ammonia or whatever the new kind of emerging technology is, like how that's going to affect my day to day. That's where the support starts to fall apart, right? So when we talk about just the governor's goals in general, right? Like they are realistic, but they're going to take work, right? They're going to take fundamental change from all of us, right? And it's one of those things that requires, DEP can't do this, BPU can't do this, the governor's office can't. No one entity alone can facilitate this transition. It has to be all of us, and it has to be industry, labor, government all working together, right? And I think that, from a grid perspective, there's work to be done here. I think that, BPU is working on it, they're studying it. I'm aware of some legislators who are starting to kind of wade into that area. We have to get kind of a real full assessment of what that looks like and be able to make decisions quickly to be able to facilitate this long term. Now, I think part of it, when you think about what the goal is, it's energy sold, right? So you're pulling renewables from other places, you're pulling renewables from here. So like some of that infrastructure exists already, but big picture, long term, significant upgrades are going to be required.
Yeah, I'll kick it to the rest of the panel. Of course, we wanted to start with the administration official, but anyone else want to weigh in?
Yeah, so I think public support is a tricky sort of thing, and I think I might be the only person today that's not profit-driven besides the folks from the administration.
I'm definitely not profit-driven.
And I think that's really important to think about. So on the first panel, when we had the CEOs come forward, one of the things they said was, we want to be leading the policy. Why? Because that's what's best for people, or that's what's best for profits, or maybe there's a combination of both. And that can happen, but I think with capitalism the way it is, sometimes you need to identify your stakeholders and say, these folks have a vested interest, right? It's shareholders, it's their employees, it's keeping the industry afloat, and other folks are stakeholders because they're just living their lives. And so when the floodwaters rush into their home, or the floodwaters rush into their business, or they lose power because of a climate-fueled storm, they don't really have a choice in that. And when you talk about public support, you also need to understand where are people getting their information. Currently, New Jersey is under an assault from the fossil fuel industry. Multi-million-dollar funded campaigns based on lies. I'll tell you a lie they say, that there's a hidden energy fee somehow in a plan that actually provides predictability and reliability to the industry that is producing energy, called the Energy Master Plan. Totally debunked. Nothing in there is mandated. It's just how do we go forward, laying out step by step. And you could look it up on, law enforcement, New Jersey ELEC, who's funding this, but it's mostly the fossil fuel merchants, okay? Off the charts funding, okay? And at the end of the day, they're fighting other things with fake ads about electric vehicles burning up all the time. Yet when ICE, internal combustion engine car, starts on fire, nobody's talking about it. Or when you have an explosion like we saw in East Palestine, no one's talking about it. When we're fracking gas in Pennsylvania and people have to have water trucked in so they can drink in their own house or business, no one's talking about it. So look at who's funding this information as the public, and then we can start to say, well, not only who's believable, but ultimately who's morally right, who's fighting for the health of our communities, who's looking at those interests, and what's their motivation. That doesn't mean that it's clear, like binary system. 1, it's this way, or 0, it's that way. It can be somewhere in between, but I think as policymakers, elected officials, need to look at each of those stakeholders and sort of understand the interests that they're coming forward with and the intentions they're bringing, and parse that out in moving forward. Because we want business to be on our side, we want labor to be on our side, we want the environment to be on our side when we're talking about the future of America and what we're passing on as far as limited natural resources, water, air, land, for our kids and grandkids. We have to leave this earth better than we found it, and it's up to us, with all of our backgrounds and all the things that are of interest to us, all the job that we're given to do, profits or people, or somewhere in between, to make that difference. And so what I would say in my work, people are very supportive of moving towards clean energy. They understand what it means to them. They understand what all the disasters that are being created because of the addiction to fossil fuels and carbon in our atmosphere and climate change, and how that's being fueled. But they do have concerns, and we need to do a better job about answering those questions each step of the way.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess from a nuclear perspective, sure. Public perception has been a huge issue over the last, I would say, 50 years.
Absolutely.
And again, Ralph talked about earlier about safe operation. And today, the technology has evolved. We're talking about safe modular reactors that are not only, economically more, are easily, the capital expenditures are less, but they are walk-away safe today. We've evolved the technology, so these small modular reactors, safe modular reactors, are basically walk-away safe. So public perception has changed. The public perception has changed with regard to climate change, understanding that baseload power is a necessity. Replacing current fossil-fired fuel power stations with nuclear, again, is a clean, safe alternative, and again, providing the baseload power that will propel us into the future, and again, absorbing other technologies as they evolve.
Sure.
So,
gotcha.
If I can, just real quick. While I am now on the industry side, I did start my career as an advocate, so I'll always have that hat on and have the opportunity to help build a company with that perspective and make it part of our missions. But at least from what we're doing with ammonia, I can think of 5 good reasons why there should be strong public support. And one of it is that the safety of ammonia is already known. As I said, it was the second most produced chemical globally. It has a very strong foundational safety regulatory structure from which to build on. It's been here and it moves around, moves by water, by rail, by truck, every single day for almost a century. The economic benefits, because this is, I said, the maritime sector specifically, which is our first target market, goods movement. Time is money, space is money. This is very important for the global economy and especially for the US economy. Job transition. Being able to take workers from oil and gas, transitioning them to emerging technologies. We are actually converting a former oil and gas manufacturing facility into our facility, so taking it from a polluting sector to a new emerging clean energy technology sector. The problem that we're trying to solve is the emissions from the maritime sector and ports. That's 30% of the population lives in and around ports, and I don't need to go into great detail. We all know the effect of those communities, those environmental justice communities that are living in this sector. And finally, energy security, the hydrogen hubs. We are also manufacturing green ammonia through the hydrogen hubs. That's energy security. Why not? For the multiple reasons we need ammonia. Now for fuel, we have our energy right here.
Thank you. Sean, good.
Yeah, so I think what I would want to say, just to kind of, I think success in this regard needs to be non-oppositional, right? And like industry side, environmental side, administration side, I don't think if we're all going to be successful in this, we continue to have a conversation about who's on what side, right? Like energy producers, whether we like it or not collectively, provide a service for the rest of us, right? I had to charge my laptop, I had my alarm clock, all this stuff, right? We all use it. So in some ways, they bear the environmental externalities for the rest of us, right? Because I don't have to produce my own energy. That's great. It's a fantastic modern convenience for me, right? So I think, to Ed's point, we need to identify the honest points of view. We need to speak to those concerns, and we need to work to address them all together. Right? So if I'm the legislator, if I'm the governor's office, if I'm the DEP, what I'm trying to do is cut through the misinformation, identify the real concerns, because there are real concerns. And I think reflected in the governor's executive order when he issued 315 is kind of the future of the natural gas utility in the state of New Jersey, right? These are major, significant institutional drivers of our economy. They employ a lot of people. They have very real stakes in this. Now, some of them are profit-driven, but they also impact the day-to-day lives of the rest of us, right? They might employ your neighbor, right? And you can't be ignorant or ignore that as you're moving forward. We have to be able to focus on those things. Because at the end of the day, right, this environmental issue, this is an energy issue, right? Like, how are we gonna produce enough energy in a clean fashion that meets the rest of our goals that's gonna continue to support our life, right? We gotta get better, and we gotta be more efficient, we gotta do all of these things. But at the end of the day, the need for energy, whether we turn the heat on or not, is not going to change long-term, right? And we have to do it all together. And we got to stop talking about sides, and we got to get at the table, and we got to have real conversations about real issues and figure out how to solve them.
Thank you very much to all of you. Great feedback, great insights into that first question. This panel is also supposed to be talking about emerging technologies, so we're going to jump to that question next. Myron, we're going to start with you, Jan, and then maybe we'll kick it over to you, and then we'll see if anyone else has feedback. But the question, obviously, we've talked about hydrogen already, ammonia already. They're the latest examples of emerging technologies that few people, especially me, expected to become so important, especially to this conversation we're having today. So, Myron, what do you expect the next emerging technology to be that we are not currently thinking about, not on the map today? And what do you think we'll be talking about 3 years from now, 5 years from now?
Well, again, I can speak from a nuclear perspective. Again, we're advancing advanced nuclear fission reactors. Holtec has been manufacturing components for the next generation of fusion reactors. A number of companies have been emerging with regard to support from the federal government as well as private investment with regard to fusion. And I see that sort of evolving and emerging coming into the next maybe longer than 2, 3 to 5 years, probably in the 15 to 20-year time frame. But as we evolve, into, again, from a nuclear perspective, fission reactors, which again will be create a base load for future energy production, evolution into fusion reactors will be something that will be coming up in the next, 15 to 20 years.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I will also be answering that question in the perspective of ammonia. But I think we're still developing that technology. It's really new from what we're doing with it. Ammonia cracking, though, is not new. What we're doing is we're being able to do it more efficiently. So I think that innovation is going to constantly be changing. Ammonia can be used 2 different ways: an ammonia combustion engine, and then the ammonia cracking in conjunction with a fuel cell. Ammonia combustion is more difficult. Those plants have been shelved. There was a demonstration project with MAN and Wartzilla that's been delayed over a year now. Ammonia is not flammable. It needs help. It needs a pilot fuel. Diesel right now is what they're looking at pilot fuel, but you can actually crack some of the ammonia and use the hydrogen as a pilot fuel. But when you're burning ammonia, you do have issue of NOx. That's why we're focusing on the cracking technology. As fuel cell technology changes and gets better, that will make ammonia technology even better. Right now we're using a low temperature PEM fuel cell with modifications. Solid oxide fuel cells could directly take ammonia. So as that technology is developing, it'll also be able to hone our technology. Also the sectors. Right now we're focusing, I said, on maritime because that's where the attention is, but we were deliberately, when we're scaling up the technology, choosing particular demonstration projects for other viable sectors such as tractors and agriculture applications and trucking. We demonstrated a 100 kilowatt John Deere tractor, gutted the diesel engine, replaced it with electric powertrain that was able to work for 10 hours. So that is a possibility. 300 kilowatt Class A truck, Cascadia Freightliner, able to run for 10 hours on a fill of ammonia. It takes about 7 minutes to refuel it. So that's where I think what we're going to be seeing is the increased number of sectors that are embracing the technology as we're learning on the maritime side, and then as the technology gets better, more compact, more energy dense, these other hard to decarbonize sectors will be able to embrace it.
Thank you.
I just want to follow up one more item in terms of future technology. Battery storage systems are evolving. Holtec is developing a thermal energy storage system. We call it's a green boiler. Again, as we evolve the different technologies for conversion of thermal back to electricity, that's something that will evolve over time. Again, combining with solar and wind, again, the excess power that's on the grid at times during the course of a day, it's going to be important to be able to store that energy. And again, the evolving technology associated with thermal storage, and again, efficient conversion back to electricity is going to be something that's going to evolve over time.
Yep.
And again, we like to think about that as it evolves with renewable energy sources as well.
Absolutely. Sean?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't care where it comes from, right, from the environmental perspective. We just have to make sure it's clean, right? And I think that, I think one of the points that I see in kind of listening to this conversation is that there are a lot of pieces that you can put together to complete the clean energy puzzle, right? We might be able to do 90% of what we need with offshore wind, or with wind. Maybe not just offshore wind, but with wind, right? Right, so we got a lot of wind, everything's blowing all the time, right? That's great, right? But you still got 10%, right? And I think the different use cases are critical to understanding what's gonna fill that remaining 10%, right? Whether it's, your heavy duty vehicles, your maritime, whatever, right? What we're going to do from the department's perspective, like we're going to wait until these kind of technologies emerge, right? And then we're going to assess how clean they are, and then we're going to have an opinion once we see them. Like our goal is that they be green, right? And obviously, the sticking point to green is having enough renewable energy on the back end to be able to produce green ammonium or green hydrogen, right? Whether that comes from small nuclear reactors, whether that comes from wind, whether that comes from solar. You need that base to be able to do it, and then you can have these other technologies that can fit some of these other use pieces. What what Myron indicated is critical is storage, right? You can't turn wind. Wind is not always consistent, and solar is obviously only available when the sun's out, right? So you got to find a way to be able to store it and to be able to reuse it, right? So all of that has to come together. And I think from an administration perspective, from a DEP perspective, like, we are all of the above. We're interested in the menu, right? And then as we move forward, we want to pick the ones that actually are green as time progresses.
Great, good.
I think those are all great points. When I was a kid, this is now 2 generations ago, in elementary school watching a film strip. So those of you who remember what film strips were, it gives you a little bit of sense of the kind of how long ago it was. And it was about this new technology, hydrogen, powering buses in Canada. And I was mesmerized, and maybe part of why I became a chemist. I actually wanted to be a lawyer first, but I couldn't do that job. I was having a hard time with all the essays and stuff. So I was like mesmerized, and then the guy took his glass and he put it at the back of the tailpipe, and he got the water, and the next thing, he's drinking the water. Oh, wow, all that comes out of that truck is drinkable water. That's amazing. Hydrogen is going to be the future, right? And here we are today talking about hydrogen is going to be the future, or these emerging technologies were the basis of the question. And I think it's really important for us to recognize a couple of things. One, I know earlier some folks had said, the folks outside are opposed to hydrogen. And while that might be sort of the headline, I want to clarify, there is probably a place where hydrogen makes sense and really hard to decarbonize. That means get away from fossil fuels, right? Sectors, and in a very limited way. But we need to make sure we're making it in the right way, which means it's based on renewables. We have to be careful we're not fracking more gas in Pennsylvania and ruining the lives of people. We have to be careful that we're not doubling down on infrastructure. You know the song? You gotta know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, you gotta know when to run. There may be some stuff that exists we wanna walk away from, right? And I know it's gonna be potentially a stranded asset for industry. It might not make sense for us to just build back the same way in a new area. So for example, hydrogen can be produced anywhere. It's very straightforward, let's say. It doesn't have to be bigger than this table. It could be as big as this platform, as big as this room. How much do you want to make? So the idea, and I was hearing this morning, we're going to make it where the nuclear facility was, and we're going to pipe it all over here. Well, why don't we make it right next to where it's being used? That's kind of what we're saying from the environmental community. How you make it and where you make it. What kind of infrastructure sits between the production of it and the usage. And then, of course, where you use it. Are we using it everywhere? And let me just tell you a little quick story again. Back in the day in your home stoves, because this comes up from time to time, they used to have chimneys on them. You've seen them. Actually, some people are talking about traveling. I traveled to Poland this summer, and my family in Poland I reunited with. We lost them for a long time. And they still cook with a wood-burning stove. Okay? And luckily, the vapors and the products of that combustion don't go into their house because they have a chimney, okay? They have a chimney that takes it away. Just like if you're on gas in your basement, there's a chimney that takes the combustion materials up out of your house. If you have a gas stove in your house and it doesn't have a chimney, not a vent hood, a chimney, you're breathing probably twice what your furnace produces in combustion products in your house, your children, your dog, your loved ones. We went away from having a chimney on those stoves to not, which is an environmental hazard in your own environment. It's something we need to address. That doesn't mean, it's the one-time solution, but basically where you use it makes a difference too. Hydrogen in homes is very hazardous. And we need really strict studies and guardrails if that's ever going to be part of the mix. So it's not just something you could just add it in now. Look at how that went with ethanol from corn in gasoline. If you run a boat or a small engine, your engine is knocking. It's not the same, okay? You can't just put any fuel in anything and it just works perfect. There's real concerns there. And then as far as other emerging technologies, going back to nuclear and small scale reactors, et cetera, and like sort of the shift for environmentalists. I mean, we never, at New Jersey LCV, opposed nuclear just on its value. Some groups have. I don't speak for every environmentalist. I will say that my colleague organizations that have supported or opposed nuclear in the past, and there are still a lot that do, they're worried about things like bombs and terrorism or overheating and not being able to cool it down, storms like we saw in Fukushima, and it took out the power and you couldn't contain it. These are real concerns, and some folks still share those concerns. I think all of us think about it a little bit, but understand that it's maybe a lesser of an evil, and that's something we're willing to understand. And let me just tell you the math real quick. Governor Murphy and a law signed by him, but supported by the entire legislature, to get us to 50% clean renewable energy by 2030, which is what we're on a track for right now. We don't need a new law. Plus 44% nuclear gets us to like 50 plus 44, let's say, what does that come out to? 94%. It's really probably like 88%, my math's not exactly right. We are on track right now to have 84% plus, 88 to 90, clean renewable energy. So what we're all talking about here with these new technologies is that 10%. It's important to get that right, but that's the 10% we're talking about.
So my question to Ed was going to be on hydrogen, but you pretty much answered
Sorry, I took
all
it
of
out
those.
of
So
order,
it's okay,
maybe?
but I want to lean into what you just talked about with nuclear really quickly with Myron, and then I'm going to end. We have about 10 minutes left for the question for Jana. But what do you attribute, Myron, the switch in mindset on nuclear to? Because Ed's exactly right. There was enormous fear and skepticism about this about the industry, and now it comes up in every conversation as being an overall net positive to the energy landscape. So I would love your thoughts on that.
Well, there's two perspectives. One, the push for, again, climate change.
Sure.
And reducing, fossil-generated electricity. The world needs to have a base load of power. The solar and wind is not going to satisfy that in the near term. So you need a base load of power. So the understanding that nuclear is going to be the only way to achieve that is one perspective. Again, you've got to accept the technology as something that's going to be needed to create that, to maintain that base load of power. Or else, again, you're going to have rolling brownouts, rolling situations. The second perspective is safe operation. Again, all the issues that have occurred with regard to, nuclear incidents basically are things that have the advances in technology and the advances in the modular reactor basically are demonstrating that nuclear power plants can be operated safely.
Right.
The events that have occurred at Fukushima were, and again, the issues associated with the nuclear side were almost insignificant compared to the actual catastrophe associated with the actual tsunami. Mm-hmm. And the recovery of the nuclear plant has demonstrated that it can be done safely. Mm-hmm. We're demonstrating that we can actually decommission and dismantle nuclear plants safely today. We're in the process of restarting another nuclear plant, again, in a safe operation. Yep. And again, what we're demonstrating through test facilities, that the computer models associated with the safety analysis on the small modular reactors, again, are basically a walk-away safe kind of situation. Mm-hmm. So, again, we're going to have to build a few, again, operate them safely, but I think the perception has changed dramatically, again, with regard to the ability to walk away safe from these nuclear plants.
Sure, absolutely. So, Jana, we're going to move on to, this is going to combine your previous life with your current life and talk a little bit about the transportation sector, the usage side, right? So much of the discussion on emerging energy technologies has focused on the issue of how to generate alternative green energy, solar, wind, of course. To what extent do we need to focus on the use side, such as transportation? Is New Jersey ahead or lagging on electric buses, charging stations, and other transportation alternatives? And I also think that this is interesting because living in South Jersey my whole life, South Jersey and North Jersey, it's even more extreme, I think, some of those answers. But anyway, I will let you take it from here. Go ahead.
Wow, that was a lot in one question.
I know, just hit it out of
I'm
the
not
park.
going to be
You
able
got
to
it.
sing my response. So there's two things I learned about you today. I think this question, I could probably talk about it, a whole panel simply on this, but I think for New Jersey, I think you need a large portfolio, and Sean, you talked about this. You know, there's not a one size fits all for this energy transition. Also, we're trying to do it a heck of a lot faster than when we got here. And you know, 3 decades to be at zero, it's going to take a lot of different options and also a huge ability to cultivate. You talked about technologies that we're not even contemplating right now. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what else is out there. I could just speak specifically from ammonia, where our technology was shelved in 2006 because it was not poised to solve the problem for some of their smaller energy demanding. But what they did not see was the potential. I think having innovation, especially around the Mach 2 hub, other hubs, and this historical investment, leaving room for innovation, leaving room for pilots and demonstrations, was written specifically out of this program. And that, to me, as a policy wonk and as an advocate, was very shocking to me, that we were taking this $10 billion over a decade and not specifically excluding innovation was shocking. So I'm hoping that some of that billions, the $2 billion or $3 billion that was held back, will be used in that regard. I think you could utilize hydrogen and hydrogen carriers to help build out an infrastructure for hydrogen refueling stations. I think that's going to be key, especially for buses and for other hydrogen demanding applications. You could utilize ammonia. You can transport and store that hydrogen as ammonia. The further you go, the more of an economic argument and benefit it has to move hydrogen as ammonia and cracking it on demand. So you could help build out not only a statewide hydrogen infrastructure, but a national infrastructure using the benefits of ammonia. But I'll leave you with this thought. When we're looking at end users, Sean, you talked about this too. You're going to wait and see how the technologies are going to come about before really digging your heels into it. What our customers or the folks that we're talking to want is clearly durability of the technology, that it works, right? That's why we're doing these demonstrations. We're working on a 1 megawatt tugboat. We're retrofitting a 1957 tugboat in Kingston, New York with our 2023 power system, to prove that not only does this work, in a lab or on a computer simulation, but it does work in real life. So that durability of the technology, but durability of policy. That's also very, very important. Nobody wants to be left with a stranded asset, especially important in maritime shipping. You're talking multi-million-dollar assets, and that requires the collaboration. And I know that very well as an advocate, always wanting to bring all of the different stakeholders into the room, and most importantly, bringing in industry, because they're light years ahead. And government and policy makers need to understand what is going on so that they're building durable policies. So I think when you look at it that way, and having New Jersey be a front runner in that innovation and capitalizing on the $750 million investment from the federal government, I think that's how New Jersey takes it to the next level.
Great answer. Anyone? Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add in a little bit. I think transportation is the #1 greenhouse gas emitter. It also has all kinds of other co-pollutants that you don't want to stick your, mouth on a tailpipe of a traditional car. That's toxic, right? So electrifying that area can really have a multitude of benefits for us. And, with the federal investments in the historic Inflation Reduction Act that are for electrification, New Jersey can be reaping those to put in the kind of infrastructure we need. And electrifying medium and heavy duty vehicles is a possibility there too, like garbage trucks, et cetera, as well as cars. And I think it's important too to note that everything kind of comes at a cost. So the fossil fuel industry enjoys about $20 billion of investments from the federal government in subsidies right now to exist, to keep the prices at the pump or at your oil tank if you're using home heating oil, sort of in check. A lot of it is produced out of this country, and it is a volatile market. So the more we can produce energy and store it here in the form of electricity, the better we're going to be than having to deal with that instability in the marketplace. And it comes at a cost for all working families. Utilities tend to make money no matter what, and the people using the stuff end up paying no matter what, right? So we got to get the margins tight on the usage so that we're doing things in the best way. This is all about chemical potential energy and how to store it, whether it's hydrogen or ammonia, even fossil fuels from the ground, or like I talked a little bit about biofuels produced through chemical reactions into another form that we can use. These are going to be critical decisions that we need to make, and we need to look at the whole picture from the beginning to the end and the total cost. And what does it mean to our environment? What does it mean to our health? What does it mean to our wallets? And in making those decisions as they relate to transportation are probably the most important because it's the one choking our air the most. Next after that, which isn't on this list maybe to talk about today, is what we're doing in our homes, how we're heating and cooling and cooking, etc. That's the next biggest usage. And then it's actually production of energy. So it's like in that order. So this is the big one, transportation, and there's a lot of opportunity and challenge as well.
Thank you. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think when you talk about, I think the kind of the durable policy is a really good kind of takeaway here, right? In terms of how, as a state, as an administration, we develop policies that are, that signal what the future is going to be, right? But that retain flexibility within that to find the best way to get there, right? When you talk, costs will always be a significant driver of policy decisions, whether we like it or not. It would be great if it wasn't, right? And then I think to Ed's point, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about, right, is parity, right? The parity between what it means to be an existing fossil fuel industry and what it means to be an emerging technology, and how fossil fuel industries grew up in many instances pre-regulation or exist in areas that are much less regulated. And what we're trying to do with kind of domestic clean energy production is to start from almost zero and build up completely new industries that would then compete or supplement or kind of work with existing fossil fuel industry infrastructure and all of that. I think we have to have real conversations about what that means from an incentive perspective, from subsidy perspective, from how do we try to create an even playing field to give emerging technologies a fighting chance to get there, right? And I think the state has done a lot there, but that's something that's always on my mind. And in seeing that it is in some ways inequitable when you're trying to, to build from zero and compete with what already exists. So I'll leave that.
Well, I think that's a good point to end on. We jammed so much information into an hour-long conversation due exclusively to your expertise. So everyone, please join me in a round of applause for our panel. I believe that wraps us up. So we are going to, okay.
Take your pictures. And the last one. Okay. All righty. Well, good afternoon. I'm Eddie Guerra, Associate Dean of the School of Earth and Environment. It appears that I stand between you and lunch, so I'll try to limit my notions to a few. First, I'm here as an emissary of Dean Voki Pofristik and the School of Earth and Environment. Recently, I examined our school's website and found the most common words on the website are research and climate, not to anyone's surprise. While we have a great deal of expertise on the effects of anthropogenic climate change, such as the atmospheres, the oceans, the land itself, our community safety, and public health, our broader expertise includes areas such as geographical information science, urban and regional planning, environmental pollutants, contaminant monitoring, and impacts on wildlife. I often say we bleed green in the School of Earth and Environment. Faculty in the school often collaborate across disciplinary boundaries. Real-world problems require multidisciplinary approaches. The school is at the ready to collaborate as needed to build this road to zero emissions. Second, I'm grateful to live in New Jersey, a state poised to lead in decarbonization. In this state, we are not held captive by climate denial. Quite the opposite. Not only is climate change a part of our K-12 curriculum, but New Jersey has an ambitious energy policy to achieve zero emissions. I am in a room with folks who can pave the road to zero carbon, in a room with industry and government leaders. Our panelists spoke of an all of the above approach, the need for a robust portfolio of energy technologies, as Senator Sweeney emphasized. Many today have discussed the need for innovation while avoiding unintended consequences. This includes a culture of safety as a necessary element. Today's discussion describes our collective effort to be cleaner, smarter, and safer. Lastly, I want to focus on kind of a personal angle. My father was an airline mechanic for United Airlines. He would discuss his experiences at work, the technology in aviation, and his dedication to safety. I have him to thank for my interest in science and technology. My undergraduate education included nuclear engineering along with my physics major. This background allowed me years later to teach a nuclear physics course here at Rowan that included a review of reactor designs. One of my lessons was the Chernobyl disaster and why this accident was a product of the RBMK reactor design and how ignorance and a lack of a safety culture could lead to such a disaster. I also made a point of contrasting it to the way things are in this nation and how nuclear power is treated with a bit more respect. Years later, I was watching the Chernobyl miniseries with my son, Alec. I know, a very strange thing to do with your teenage son. But every time we watched the show, he wanted to debrief afterwards. And so I had to pull out my notes, and in effect, I started teaching on parts of the course. I found myself echoing my father when I told him that the lessons learned the hard way must be applied to make a technology safer. So when time allows, I do discuss technologies and environmental issues and what we have done to our environment with both my children, Alec and Celeste. I emphasize that all technologies have positives and negatives, and we need to be aware of these costs, so to speak, of these technologies and make sure they are not distributed in an unjust manner. Some of our panelists spoke about the need for environmental justice. We know that all stakeholders need to be engaged, and Senator Sweeney spoke on this need to have conversations, like the one we are having here that has just begun at this gathering. We can all agree that technology should be improved to minimize risks and to create a greener energy portfolio. I think of the long evolution of aviation safety as an example, how minimizing risk and studying and improving technologies can occur, and again, learning from the lessons of the past. From what I've seen and heard, particularly the Holtec SMR nuclear reactor is an intriguing design. Again, knowing a bit about nuclear physics, a pressurized water reactor is considered one of the safer reactors designs out there, and Holtec designing this walkaway kind of design is intriguing. This is important given the specific safety and security issues with nuclear fission. We also see that the march to nuclear fusion energy on Earth continues. For now, we'll just have to receive indirect fusion energy from the sun. My son Alec is now a sophomore at Rowan, majoring in chemical engineering. I do expect to continue to discuss with him the prospects of the portfolio of energy production. This is an area that he has a lot of interest in. And again, that portfolio will be including things like nuclear, hydrogen, ammonia, wind, and solar, and very importantly, energy storage. Alec may find ammonia a bit more interesting a molecule after I get a chance to bend his ear about this new technology that we learned about today. I actually find the molecule compelling in its own right, so let's just give a hurrah for ammonia. I also expect Celeste, my high school senior at home, who is an activist in her own right, will be bringing a critical eye to all of these technologies. She doesn't let me off the hook just because she's not a quote-unquote science person. Both my children ask a lot about solar and wind. They're making it clear where they want the road to direct to in the long run. Of all the stakeholders out there, my children are the ones that are pretty good at holding me accountable. Anyway, I want to thank you all for your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on this road to zero. Thank you.
It's where hydrogen works. We're not combusting it. So these are
Have you met before, or is this first time? Maybe not.
Steve's
the public affairs.
Yeah, that's great.